A large crowd gathers before a magnificent, sunlit palace, their backs to the viewer. A woman with long, white hair, dressed in an ornate blue gown, stands before two guards at a grand set of doors. A man with white hair and a fur-collared cape joins the woman in the blue gown. The white-haired man smirks and extends his hand to the white-haired woman, who smiles in return. Wearing a golden crown, the white-haired woman declares with a radiant smile, "This is me." A voice asks if the emperor and princess have arrived, revealing the story of how she was recognized as royalty after a humble past. The newly crowned princess reaches forward with a bright smile, her somber past self reflected behind her. The story shifts to a year ago in the vast Altrasia imperial capital, Edelweiss. A white-haired girl named Freya is greeted by a townsperson while walking through a bustling market. Freya explains she's enjoying a day of shopping after working at the hospital for a month, reflecting on her initial surprise at the city's crowds. In a flashback, Freya recalls her past, leaving her aunt and two younger brothers in a small northern village after her parents' death. Having finished shopping, Freya decides to take a walk but is distracted by a hooded girl arguing with a merchant. The hooded girl angrily insists she has money, but the merchant states he can't make change for her currency. Freya watches the commotion, guessing the frustrated girl might be the child of a noblewoman. As she listens, Freya realizes the hooded girl is likely carrying only valuable gold coins. Freya is struck by the girl's familiar appearance, just as she notices a group of menacing men eyeing her. The hooded girl senses danger as the men close in, but a voice suddenly calls out, claiming to have been looking for her. Freya unexpectedly grabs the hooded girl's hand, pulling her away from the looming threat. Stunned, Freya stares at the hooded girl, whose face is a near-perfect mirror of her own, and asks who she is. Freya quickly pays the merchant, telling the hooded girl their boss is waiting and they must leave immediately. Dragging the girl to safety, Freya claims her guards are waiting nearby, earning a grateful thank you from the rescued girl. Now sitting on a bench, Freya warns the upset girl that she was being targeted and shouldn't display gold coins so openly. The hooded girl admits she's only ever seen gold coins, so Freya explains that commoners use copper and silver. Admitting she's never spent much money, the hooded girl's naivete makes Freya think she's beautiful, like a jewel. Freya observes that the girl seems to be alone for a reason, while the girl sadly confirms she doesn't want to be. The hooded girl takes Freya's hand just as Freya remembers something. With a cheerful smile, Freya offers the hooded girl a sandwich. The hooded girl looks at the sandwich with a surprised expression. As the hooded girl eats, Freya mentions she has been thinking about something. The hooded girl smiles knowingly and replies that she has been thinking as well, piquing Freya's curiosity. Realizing their striking resemblance, the hooded girl introduces herself as Luchia and asks for Freya's name. Freya introduces herself, thinking Luchia is a cute name and correctly guessing she must be incognito. Luchia confirms she's in disguise and asks Freya to show her around the town. The two girls happily explore the town together, looking at fresh bread and produce. Lucia stretches joyfully, declaring she's never had so much fun, which surprises Freya. Freya quietly wonders about Luchia, who is clearly a noble lady despite her current appearance. Luchia confesses her lonely life, ignored by her emperor father and fiancé, mocked by servants, and grieving her dead mother. A vision of a cold-looking man with black hair and red eyes appears, representing Luchia's uncaring fiancé. Luchia trails off when speaking of her father, as an image of the white-haired emperor from the beginning appears. Flashes of sorrowful memories appear, the emperor's jeweled brooch, Luchia's tears, and her hand falling limp. Luchia brushes off Freya's concern, bitterly stating that nothing good ever happens to her. Freya realizes her assumption was wrong. She feels sympathy for Luchia, understanding that her life must be difficult. Freya admits that despite Luchia's hardships, she feels a bit jealous, leaving Luchia confused. Clenching her fist, Freya confesses her desire to study so she can leave her tailoring job for something better. Freya hopes a better job would allow her brothers to return home. Hearing this, Luchia admits she is jealous that Freya can go to school. Luchia remarks on how the townspeople love Freya, contrasting Freya's freedom with her own trapped existence. After a moment of silent thought, Luchia looks at Freya with newfound resolve. Turning away slightly, Luchia prepares to ask Freya for one last favor. In a swirl of golden light, Luchia excitedly exclaims that Freya is just like her. Freya, now dressed in Luchia's elegant light blue dress, gives a gentle, warm smile. Luchia, now in Freya's clothes, marvels at the beautiful dress Freya wears, wondering if she dresses like that daily. Radiant in her new commoner's attire, Luchia smiles, surrounded by a cascade of sunlit flowers. Freya, wearing Luchia's gown, is struck by their identical appearance, but questions Luchia's hood before calling out to her. As the sun sets on the town, Luchia reminds Freya of her earlier wish to study. After Freya confirms her desire, Luchia brightly proposes that they switch places for a while. Utterly shocked by the audacious suggestion, Freya can only stare in disbelief. Luchia explains her plan. She wants to live as a commoner, while Freya can get the best education at the Imperial Palace. Proposing it as an equal deal, Luchia smiles, leaving Freya to stammer in shock at the mention of the palace. Just as a nobleman dismisses his men, they spot Freya in the princess's dress and shout, "There she is!" Luchia smirks mischievously, bidding farewell to the princess as the bewildered Freya begs her to wait. Imperial guards seize Freya, declaring they've been searching for her while knocking Luchia to the ground in their haste. As Luchia is swept away, a panicked Freya is dragged off, realizing with horror that this is really happening. The scene shifts to a vast and lonely blue room, where Freya sits looking small and lost. In a simple nightgown, Freya sits on an ornate bed, her expression filled with misery and confusion. Upon arriving at the castle, Freya is roughly bathed by maids who call her dirty and demand her cooperation. A maid glances at the unlit fireplace, telling Freya to rest and not to worry about them lighting it. Freya reflects on her situation so far, remembering the hooded Luchia as she sits alone in her room. The weight of her impersonation crashes down on Freya as she imagines the disastrous consequences, fearing she'll be executed if caught. Resolved, Freya steels herself with the thought that she cannot afford to be discovered at any cost. A new day begins as a small bird chirps on a branch outside a palace window. A maid enters to wake Freya, chiding her for sleeping so late as a groggy Freya apologizes. Waking in a daze, Freya asks where she is, earning a sharp rebuke from the maid for forgetfulness. Freya's eyes snap open as she gives herself a mental shake, reminding herself she must act as Luchia in the palace. Now fully alert, Freya composes herself, ready to face the challenges of her new role. Observing the maid, Freya realizes she's a dressing maid and deduces that the princess requires help changing clothes. Freya discovers that the life of a princess is a whirlwind of endless lessons and etiquette, far busier than she imagined. Immersed in a schedule packed with demanding lessons, Freya is most shocked that no one has noticed she's an imposter. In a moment of fear, Freya holds a mask before her face, symbolizing her dangerous deception. Walking through the palace halls, Freya finds it unbelievable that no one is suspicious and realizes something else is at play. Freya overhears maids gossiping about the princess, mocking her for running away crying pathetically the day before. As the maids whisper that they'd be too embarrassed to show their face, Freya's expression hardens with anger. Freya confronts the startled maids, coolly asking if she isn't allowed to walk freely in her own home. With a disarmingly sweet smile, she asks if they were discussing something secret, causing a maid to deny it nervously. The intimidated maids bow deeply as Freya stands over them with a commanding presence. Freya challenges the maids directly, telling them to say whatever they have to say to her face. Silenced by her directness, the gossiping maids stand stiffly, unable to respond. Alone again, Freya sits in frustration, realizing that despite her being missing for a day, not one person showed any concern. She concludes with bitterness that absolutely no one in the entire residence cares about the real princess. Lost in thought, Freya quietly contemplates the loveless reality of Luchia's life in the palace. Her eyes flash with determination as she clenches her fist, deciding to take matters into her own hands. The next morning, Freya is already awake and waiting when the maid arrives, curtly telling her, "You're late." Sitting on her bed in a simple blue nightgown, Freya greets the new day with a bright, determined smile. While studying, Freya reflects that Luchia, though clueless, isn't a bad person, and notes the servant's superficial use of honorifics. She recalls the staff's true feelings: dismissive maids, disdainful butlers, and a condescending tutor, all showing zero respect for Luchia. Determined to survive, Freya resolves to do what's necessary to avoid execution if she's discovered. To achieve her goal, she sits in a magnificent library, ready to immerse herself in learning new skills. Palace gossip begins to circulate about the princess's sudden diligence in her studies, leaving many to wonder what changed. While having tea, Freya's calm facade crumbles as she overhears maids whispering behind her, fuming that she can hear them. Freya's anger boils over as she slams her fist down, startling the gossiping maids with her outburst. She quietly wonders about the cheerful girl she met, questioning if Luchia's bright personality was merely a facade for the palace. A nervous red-haired maid with a tea cart apologizes to Freya for the delay. The maid frets internally, terrified of making a mistake while serving the princess, who everyone says is acting strangely. Recalling how other maids force this duty upon her, the new maid's hands tremble as she grips the teapot. Freya notices the maid's distress, wondering if she's all right, and gently calls out to her. Startled by Freya's voice, the maid cries out, "Eek!" and loses her grip on the teapot. With a cry of "Careful," Freya lunges forward, grabbing the falling teapot just in time. The stunned maid looks on in silent confusion as Freya holds her arm protectively. Freya gives the young maid a warm, reassuring smile, surrounded by a gentle, sparkling aura. Flustered, the red-haired maid quickly stammers that she's fine. As tea spills everywhere, the horrified maid drops to her knees, begging for forgiveness. Freya calmly dismisses the spill, but internally worries about cleaning Luchia's dress. More concerned for the maid, Freya asks if she was burned. The maid quickly assures her she's completely fine. While Freya calls for help, the maid thinks that the rumors about an awkward, short-tempered princess must be wrong. The maid is touched, thinking that the princess's gentle nature resembles pure white lilies. The scene shifts to the Grand Palace, where a week has now passed since Freya took Luchia's place. Reading a book, Freya finds it strange that there has been no word from Luchia and that her deception hasn't been exposed. She ponders Lucia's family, recalling that while her mother passed away, the Emperor is still alive. The realization that Luchia still has a father dawns on her. Looking through a history book, she finds a portrait of the white-haired Emperor, confirming Luchia has a father. The text describes him as Victor, the current Emperor of Altrasia, who has a military background. She reads on, learning that the original heir, Victor's older brother, was poisoned while Victor was away on an expedition. Following his brother's assassination, Victor claimed the throne after a bloody battle for succession. His reign is based on merit, evaluating the nobility and creating systems to employ talented commoners, and he is popular for his focus on education. An image shows happy commoner children learning to read, a testament to his policies. However, this ruthless emperor, Luchia's father, is also known for dismissing anyone he deems incompetent, ruling with absolute meritocracy. A flustered tutor in the library rushes away, loudly denying something. Freya slams a book shut in fury, wondering how a father could fail to even check on his own daughter after she went missing. She reflects sadly that not all fathers are so cold, a memory of a different kind of paternal care flashing in her mind. Her anger grows as she realizes that since female children have rights to the throne in Altrasia, he should have at least cared for Luchia. A sudden idea strikes Freya as she leans over her desk with a determined look. She identifies the headmaid, noting that despite mocking Luchia the most, she's an important servant in the palace. With a bright smile, Freya tells the headmaid she wishes to meet the Emperor, assuming he must be worried about her. As Freya explains her plan, the headmaid scoffs with a condescending smirk, thinking the princess is completely unaware of her own situation. The headmaid mockingly asks if Freya lost her senses while in town, leaving her utterly shocked. Looking down on her with disdain, the headmaid declares that there is no way His Majesty would ever agree to meet the princess. The headmaid continues her tirade, condescendingly asking how she can't understand that the Emperor has never paid attention to her nonsense before. Turning her back, the maid tells Freya her request is audacious and warns her not to bother her with such useless matters again. Freya stands frozen in shock, stammering as she tries to process the maid's blatant disrespect. Clenching her fists in her dress, Freya seethes with anger, thinking the maid is being unbearably rude. Stomping away, Freya fumes that a daughter needing permission to see her own father is ridiculous and that he is the worst parent imaginable. Standing alone, Freya has a moment of clarity, realizing something critical from the headmaid's words. She deduces that the reason all the servants treat Luchia so poorly stems from the Emperor himself. Freya understands now that every time Luchia complained to the Emperor, she was ignored, which only emboldened the staff's cruelty. This grim realization only strengthens her resolve. Freya walks purposefully down the hall, passing two other maids carrying cleaning supplies. She confronts the two maids with newfound determination, declaring that she has no choice but to meet the Emperor. Her eyes burn with intensity as she firmly states that she has something she needs to ask him. Finally arriving at a grand ornate door, Freya takes a deep breath, preparing herself for the confrontation. A male attendant opens the door, and Freya politely apologizes for arriving without an appointment before requesting to see her father. As the attendant leaves to check, Freya feels a flicker of hope, thinking that if things go well, she might finally be able to talk to him. A cold, disembodied voice commands to send her away, leaving the white-haired girl utterly stunned. The male attendant protests, but the Emperor icily repeats his command to send her away without so much as a glance. As she is led away, Freya is devastated, unable to believe a father would dismiss his own daughter without even looking at her. She is quickly pulled away from the Emperor's door by the attendant. Refusing to be dismissed so easily, Freya forcefully pushes past the attendant, shouting for them to wait. Bursting into the office, she comes face to face with the man at the desk, realizing this is Luchia's father. Sitting before a brightly lit window, the white-haired Emperor's silhouette is cold and imposing. His piercing gaze sends a chill down her spine. She thinks that's no way a father should ever look at his daughter. While the Emperor coldly repeats his order to send her away, Freya clenches her fist, determined to speak. She formally apologizes for her past behavior, but the Emperor cuts her off with a single dismissive question. Is that all? Annoyed, the Emperor flicks his gloved hand and tells the attendant she's wasting his time and to make her leave. The attendant gently escorts her toward the door, but Freya desperately cries out for them to wait. Once she is gone, the attendant notes her visit was unusual, but the Emperor coldly states he holds no expectations for her. Immediately moving on, the Emperor dismisses the entire incident and orders the attendant to continue his report. Freya is left standing alone in the grand hallway, staring at the closed doors. Suddenly, she understands everything. Luchia ran away to escape the servant's cruelty and her own father's chilling indifference. His cruel words, declaring her a waste of time and having no expectations for her, echo in her mind. Leaning against the door, Freya breaks down in tears, hiccuping as she questions her own sorrow. Tears stream down her face as she clutches her dress, wondering why she feels so incredibly sad over this. The next morning, a maid pulls open the curtains, announcing that it's time for the princess to wake up. Still looking heartbroken, Freya peeks from under her covers and asks if she can rest a little longer. The scene shifts to her quiet, empty desk, her books left untouched. She reflects on her sleepless night, haunted by the Emperor's cold declaration that he held no expectations for her. Tossing and turning, her initial sadness boils over into pure, seething anger. She realizes the Emperor never cared for Luchia at all, which is why the servants felt free to neglect and torment her. Clutching a pillow with newfound resolve, Freya declares that she will prove him wrong. An unfamiliar voice interrupts her thoughts, chiding her for still being in her nightgown after breakfast time. It's the headmaid, and Freya recalls asking a different servant to wake her, annoyed that this one barged in without knocking. The headmaid smugly blames the princess's selfishness for disrupting the staff's schedule, warning they won't be ordered around anymore. Freya calmly turns the insult around, asking if the maid is simply incapable of performing such a simple task, leaving her stunned. She continues coolly, pointing out that anyone can fall ill and need rest, even a common tailor's wife. With a disarmingly sweet smile, Freya asks the maid if she has misjudged her capabilities. Whap! The head maid erupts in fury, sputtering that as head of the palace staff, her competence is beyond question. As punishment for her perceived insolence, the maid declares Freya will receive no breakfast or lunch, hoping she'll reflect on her position. Slam! The maid storms out, leaving Freya alone and locked in her room. Freya is left in disbelief, wondering if it's truly normal for a servant to punish their master by withholding meals. Her thoughts drift to her time at the bakery, recalling she was too busy helping with orders to eat anything herself. As she resigns herself to waiting for dinner, a golden bird unexpectedly lands on her windowsill. Surprised, she notices a small, rolled-up paper tied to the bird's leg and wonders where it came from. The bird hops onto her shoulder as she unrolls the note, her eyes widening in realization as she reads. A vision of a cloaked Luchia appears. Freya now knows for certain the letter is from the real princess. Hearing a knock, Freya quickly moves to the door and calls for the person to come in. A timid, red-haired maid peeks in, and Freya is surprised to see a familiar face. She immediately recognizes the girl as the young maid, who had spilled tea on her dress before. The red-haired maid nervously explains she heard the princess wasn't getting any breakfast and came to check on her. She shyly offers 2 pieces of bread she managed to hide, apologizing that it's all she could bring. The maid then apologizes for her rudeness, leaving Freya speechless at the unexpected act of kindness. Freya smiles warmly, but insists they share the bread so the kind maid won't go hungry, causing the girl to blush. The maid reveals the head maid announced to all the staff not to serve her, and Freya realizes she was meant to be starved from the start. Laughing it off with the bird on her shoulder, Freya's good humor makes the flustered maid smile. A white-haired girl in a nightgown is startled by a bird landing in her room, panicking that she might get caught. A diagram reveals their identity swap is at risk of being exposed, but the girl laughs it off, telling a red-haired maid to return to her duties. The red-haired maid, identified as Saria, looks on in surprise. Now alone, the white-haired girl smiles sweetly while holding a piece of bread. She picks up a letter, ready to begin writing. Writing to her beloved F, she reports that everything is going all right, aside from messing up her job on the first day. She muses that while her friend would have been an office worker, she herself enjoys being a seamstress. She happily recounts being praised for her skill and asks her friend if she's doing okay, signing off as your secret friend, L. In a postscript, she names the messenger bird Chateau and gives instructions for sending a reply. She collapses in frustration, realizing the letter was missing crucial information about their arrangement. She wonders if this all happened because they have the same face, but hopes the real Luchia is happy. A memory of a woman urging a younger version of herself to help people in need flashes through her mind. With a look of determination, she resolves to do her best. Gazing out the window, she vows to give her all to make Luchia comfortable when she returns. Later, while reading a book in a purple dress, she's interrupted and asks if there is a guest. A maid announces that Lord Ortval has come to visit, but the girl has no idea who that is. Flabbergasted, the maid reminds her that Lord Fenon Ortval is her fiancé and scolds her for being unprepared. The maid emphasizes Lord Ortval's importance and the princess's duties to the crown. The girl is stunned to remember she has a fiancé, recalling he pays her no mind, before eagerly realizing this is a chance to gather information. Elsewhere, a dark-haired man in a formal uniform looks downcast, wondering what to do about a situation he wasn't informed of. A profile reveals he is the eldest son of a distinguished family, engaged to the princess a year ago, at the emperor's request. Palace rumors suggest the engagement is a sign that the emperor doesn't consider Luchia a worthy heir. Now beautifully dressed, the girl, acting as Luchia, apologizes for the wait as her maids fuss over her, determined to make a good impression. She stands nervously before her fiancé, wondering how to handle the situation. A formal portrait introduces the man as Luchia's fiancé. As he sits silently, she marvels at how handsome all the nobles seem to be. He takes her hand to kiss it, and apologizes for a miscommunication, leaving her completely shocked. Flustered, she quickly pulls her hand away, insisting that everything is fine. She apologizes for her own rudeness, privately thinking he's just being considerate. Her thoughts are interrupted by another sudden and confusing development. Lord Ortval kneels, offering to apologize for his rudeness the other day, and says he will leave if she's not in a good mood. Utterly bewildered, she struggles to keep her composure, imagining a different Luchia and feeling on the verge of tears. With a troubled expression, she touches her earring, trying to process the situation. She cautiously asks him what he means by apology. He explains that he can't comfortably accept her apology without understanding what it's for, as she forces a smile, internally panicking. He clarifies that he's apologizing for upsetting her the other day, and a memory of him finding her crying flashes before her eyes, shocking her. Watched by nervous servants, he formally presents his apology for his rude behavior and asks if she will accept it. Feeling the pressure from the servants' stares, she forces a laugh and agrees. He observes her with a serious expression as she smiles, her heart racing. The two begin a quiet walk through a sunlit garden colonnade. As they continue their stroll, she panics internally, realizing they haven't spoken a single word. She finds his polite demeanor strange, considering the rumors she's heard about Luchia. A close-up reveals Lord Ortval's stern expression, with a note stating he hasn't smiled once in his life. She pieces things together, realizing that the engagement was a political decision, not a personal one. She finally understands that when Luchia felt ignored, it was because people only saw her as the princess. A painful memory shows a young Luchia crying alone on the floor, unnoticed by the adults around her. Despite the circumstances, she doesn't believe he's neglecting Luchia, though his polite actions make his true feelings impossible to read. As he walks ahead, she wonders if this meeting is just another duty he is obligated to perform. She looks away, thinking that his purely dutiful demeanor feels surprisingly lonely. She explains to Lord Ortval that since she was also at fault and made him wait, they are now even, privately admitting she doesn't know what really happened. A slightly flustered Lord Ortval questions her declaration, while she insists that being overly considerate can make others uncomfortable. With a bright smile, she suggests they move on to a more meaningful topic and asks about his work, which surprises him. He explains he is the commander of the 2nd Unit, the castle's permanent defense, leading her to realize he's a knight. He assumes she wouldn't be interested, but she firmly states that's for her to decide and presses him for more details about his career. He reveals he has recently been serving beside the Emperor, making her realize he must be exceptionally skilled to be trusted by such a man. Her eyes light up with genuine fascination and a wide, happy smile. Taken aback by her enthusiasm, Lord Ortval asks if she's truly interested, causing her to react with surprise. She reflects on her lifelong interest in expensive horses, a passion the real Luchia never shared. Blushing with excitement, she eagerly asks if it's really okay for her to be interested in them. He offers a visit to the stables as part of his apology, but when she refuses, he reframes it as a simple suggestion from him. Taking her hands in his, he gives a slight smile and promises to arrange everything soon. Her eyes widen in shock as a single thought consumes her. He smiled. As the sun sets, Lord Ortval departs in his carriage. Alone, he reflects that the princess was right. Their meetings have always been just a duty. He admits her drastically different personality is throwing him off, especially since they've never agreed to meet outside the palace before. He remains puzzled, recalling his belief that she despised all physical activities. The story pauses, marked by a to-be-continued notice over an image of the girl in a pink dress. Narration reveals that rumors of the princess's strange new behavior are spreading throughout Windsor Palace. A brown-haired headmaid recalls how the princess never used to talk back to her during all the years she's managed the palace. The headmaid remembers her first meeting with the young princess, recalling how she smiled in satisfaction. She muses that the princess only pretended to be confident to hide her flaws, as the royal title was too heavy for her. The maid coldly recalls how easily the princess's spirit was broken, likening it to crushing a fragile butterfly. She remembers manipulating the young, unloved princess by telling her to simply obey the emperor, causing Luchia to isolate herself. The maid reflects on how simple it was to dismiss the servants loyal to the princess and seize control of the palace. But now the maid thinks with a grimace, something has changed. Wondering about the source of the princess's new confidence, her thoughts are interrupted when another servant brings a letter for the princess. The headmaid looks at the letter with a suspicious and calculating expression. Holding the sealed invitation, she smirks, remarking to herself what an interesting coincidence it is. The headmaid presents the letter, surprising the girl with the news that it's an invitation to a tea party. The white-haired girl looks up from her book, listening to the maid's announcement. She panics internally, realizing she doesn't even know the person who sent the invitation. Examining the letter, she notices it has already been opened and correctly assumes this is not normal palace procedure. Recognizing the invitation as a trap, she hesitates, only for the headmaid to pointedly ask if she plans to decline, as she always does. Caught off guard, the girl impulsively asks the maid if she thinks she should go. The maid claims she didn't mean to pressure her, but notes that constantly refusing invitations from nobles reflects poorly on a princess. The maid continues her manipulation, suggesting that attending would please the emperor and avoid disappointing Lord Ortval. She concludes the headmaid has a hidden agenda for the tea party and contemplates what the real Luchia would do. She understands the maid is using the emperor's name to manipulate her, knowing the real Luchia would typically give in. The girl holds the letter, her expression hardening with resolve. Decisively, she places her hand on the letter, concluding that she must accept the invitation. However, she vows not to walk into the trap blindly and decides to figure things out first, especially with Luchia's return date still unknown. She grabs her head, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. Her eyes are wide with shock as the reality of her situation sets in. A moment of quiet determination passes as she firms her resolve. Standing before an enormous wardrobe, she feels lost, admitting she has no idea what to wear and is intimidated by the complex layers. She laments her lack of fashion sense, remembering her simple past as a girl from the countryside. A warm memory surfaces of her past self, named Freya, smiling brightly alongside two young boys. The white-haired girl looks onward with quiet determination. She recalls her mother once worked for a noble lady, hoping those lessons might help her now. Overwhelmed by the vast wardrobe, she nervously prepares to step into her role as the princess. She complains that servants take ages to answer her bell, and a few hours later, a maid finally arrives, much to her annoyance. Recalling her mother's words that dresses are weapons, she decides not to trust the servants and smirks, feeling she has things under control. A single footstep marks her advance. The new maid stammers nervously, asking if she needed something, while the girl laughs it off. The maid coldly suggests she study as usual, remarking that she isn't interested in dresses anyway. The girl pretends to agree, but her expression hardens, signaling a change of plans. She surprises the maid by calling her by her name, Lisette. Lisette wonders how the princess knows her name, while the girl decides to act, explaining she's been invited to a tea party and needs fashion advice. Reaching out a hand, she asks for help, leaving the shocked Lisette to wonder why she was chosen. The girl explains it's because she knows Lisette loves dresses, stunning the maid into silence. She reveals she's noticed Lisette discussing dress trends and even criticizing her own outfits behind her back. She reflects on how she's been gathering information since arriving, listening to conversations and memorizing the names of the princess's staff. Realizing most servants are just tired, not hateful, she reassures a flustered Lisette, who begins to apologize. With a warm smile, she reaches out, telling Lisette she looked so happy when talking about fashion. She asks if her request is a mistake or will cause trouble, leaving Lisette to ponder the consequences. Lisette hesitantly says no, reasoning that nobody really cares what the princess wears anyway. The girl smiles, asking if Lisette will help her, while the maid recalls the headmaid's dismissive instructions about the princess. Lisette remembers being told the princess is a recluse whom the emperor has already given up on. She thinks back on her dream of being a princess's maid, surrounded by beautiful dresses and jewelry. Realizing the princess has seen her genuine passion, Lisette firmly agrees to help. Seeing Lisette's newfound determination, the girl's eyes light up with hope. She beams with a brilliant, joyful smile. Her expression turning serious, she asks Lisette about the host of the tea party. Lisette reacts in alarm, grabbing her and asking if the host is truly from the Claymore Marquise family. Jolted by the sudden reaction, the girl asks what's wrong, but Lisette can only stammer about the Marquise' daughter. Lisette reveals the shocking truth. The host used to be engaged to Lord Ortval. Alone at her desk, the girl reflects on Lisette's discomfort while discussing the topic. Understanding she can't press for more details, she connects the dots. The Claymore family must resent Luchia for the broken engagement a year ago. She realizes the previous engagement must have been abruptly cancelled due to the Emperor's command for Luchia to marry Lord Ortval. She puffs out her cheeks, annoyed by the complicated situation. A moment later, a confident smile returns to her face as she sits at her desk. A beautiful white and gold royal carriage stands ready. The carriage departs as the day of the tea party arrives. She recalls asking the real Luchia about the attendees, only to receive a clueless reply, leaving her just as confused. Though she feels it's rude not to know the host, she finds some comfort in Luchia's ignorance and is grateful she asked Lisette for help. Lisette's thoughts reveal that since Luchia rarely socializes, her attire for this party needs careful consideration. Lisette thinks about how Lucia's few outings are controlled by the headmaid, with preparations always rushed due to last-minute notice. Deciding not to share more, Lisette trails off, and the girl senses she still isn't fully trusted. But Lisette's professional pride ignites, and she vows to ensure the princess won't be embarrassed, earning a timid request for her help. While Lisette works feverishly, her pride on the line, the girl wilts from exhaustion, fearing she'll be laughed at for being clueless. Looking at her reflection, she notes that she's been exploring the palace more since taking Luchia's place. As she walks the hall, she's greeted politely by the staff and realizes they don't seem to dislike Luchia. She suspects they're just laughing at rumors and believes things would be different if they actually spoke to the princess. She resolves to stick around and build relationships, convinced she can change things over time. Terrified by the thought of a guillotine, she renews her commitment to fix Luchia's image and avoid execution. The royal carriage pulls up to a grand, ornate gate. The gates swing open, revealing the destination, the Marquise Claymore's mansion. Upon arrival, the girl is formally welcomed to the mansion by a blonde woman in a pink dress. The blonde woman is introduced as Adelia, the eldest daughter of the Claymore Marquise family. Adelia gives a warm, welcoming smile. The girl is momentarily stunned, blushing as she thinks how gorgeous Adelia is. Noticing Luchia's stunned reaction, Adelia kindly asks if something is wrong. She quickly recalls royal etiquette, realizing she almost bowed inappropriately, and thinks Adelia might actually like her. Adelia gestures welcomingly, telling Luchia that everyone has been excited to meet her. The girl reconsiders her initial suspicions, thinking that perhaps Adelia is nicer than she thought. The scene pans over a lively tea party, filled with the cheerful chatter of young noblewomen. Suddenly, the girl feels a chill as she senses a dark atmosphere and sees visions of the other ladies whispering. Clasping her hands together, she resolves to simply keep smiling for now. Forcing a pleasant expression, Luchia offers a polite greeting to the other guests. She apologizes for her late arrival, noting that she seems to be the last one to get there. The other ladies quickly reassure her, expressing what an honor it is to finally meet her in person. As the tea party proceeds, she reflects that since Luchia rarely attended such events, she doesn't know anyone's names. Looking over the lavish spread of desserts, she concludes it's understandable that she's unfamiliar with the guests. Adelia engages in pleasant conversation with the other young women at the lavishly set table. While sipping her tea, Luchia wonders if she's just overthinking things, but then notices the other girls whispering again. As a large raven flies over the garden party, an unseen voice begins a new topic. Adelia turns to the girl and asks what she typically does with her free time. A heavy feeling descends as the cheerful mood vanishes, replaced by an ominous aura and dark birds swirling around her. Maintaining her composure, she smiles and says that with so much to learn, she spends most of her time studying. Adelia feigns admiration while another girl comments that it makes sense for someone who will inherit the throne. Adelia expresses faux concern, asking if inviting her was trouble, since she's usually a recluse and getting ready must have been difficult. In that moment, the girl senses a hidden signal as Adelia suddenly pivots, claiming she knows little about politics. Adelia then mentions that Sir Fenon is always with the Emperor, suggesting his position must be quite difficult. Her friendly facade cracks, and the girl stares back, now understanding the true, malicious intent behind the conversation. The scene flashes back to a simple room, where a white-haired woman works at a desk surrounded by fabric. The woman, the real Luchia, is shown quietly sitting and working in solitude. She recalls asking someone about Lady Claymore after receiving her invitation, and the person claimed not to know her, a memory Luchia now recognizes as a lie. Luchia reflects that she does know Adelia, who debuted at 14 and was the first person to ever send her a party invitation. She recalls how suffocating life in the palace felt, longing for a way out. At the time, she had naively hoped that stepping out into society might help her make a friend. Luchia remembers receiving the invitation and thinks to herself that the girl who took her place is a truly strong person. Back at the party, the girl looks on in confusion, trying to piece everything together. Luchia's memory reveals the truth. Adelia smiled sweetly at her debut while orchestrating the other nobles to shun and isolate her, a shocking betrayal. A shadowy hand surrounded by thorns symbolizes the carefully laid trap. The illusion shatters as Adelia smirks, watching the girl's teacup fall and spill its contents. In her room, the real Luchia cries, worrying that the girl who took her place will be okay. Luchia laments that nobles always cover up scandals and resolves not to be a burden to the new princess anymore. She remains at her desk, lost in somber, silent thought. At the tea party, Adelia's question about Lord Fenon hangs in the air, the other ladies watching expectantly. The girl finally understands. Luchia wasn't a recluse by choice. She stayed in her room to protect herself from this cruelty. Adelia's voice echoes, innocently asking about a typical day for an imperial princess. The girl sees the web of isolation woven around Luchia, the emperor's distrust, the staff's neglect, and realizes it was all a trap. She recalls the seemingly innocent question about Lord Fenon, now understanding its loaded implication. Adelia's triumphant, knowing smile confirms she has sprung her trap. It all makes sense now. She realizes everyone has been looking down on Luchia from the very beginning. Sitting back to back with a phantom of the real Luchia, she thinks there must be more to this situation. The headmaid's dismissive words flash in her mind, revealing that the staff's attitude was a direct reflection of the emperor's indifference. Her mind races, connecting the dots between the engagement, Lord Oscar's succession, and Lord Ordvar's increasing time with the Emperor. A flashback shows a dark-haired man thinking about how he's been by His Majesty's side more often lately. As the girl stands lost in thought, a close-up on Adelia reveals her sinister belief that she can finally read her rival's mind. She fully grasps the crushing reality she never understood before. The Emperor does not love her, leaving her isolated and vulnerable. The painful understanding consumes her, as she realizes how much more Luchia must have suffered through this all alone. Thinking back, she realizes her feeling of walking through a minefield was right, because they truly intended to hurt Luchia. She now understands the entire tea party was a setup to provoke Luchia's rumored temper and create juicy gossip for the nobles. They deliberately wanted to reopen old wounds, targeting her with the cruelest intentions, and she realizes people like Adelia are at the center of it. A cold fury settles in her eyes as she concludes that people like Adelia are the ones she despises the most. Adelia presses on, asking about her fiancé Lord Oscar, and recalling a past incident where he disappeared, causing things to go badly after a small mention. But as Adelia waits for a reaction, she grows concerned, wondering why the princess remains so unnervingly calm today. Turning the tables with a bright smile, the girl casually asks Adelia about her own close relationship with Lord Fenon. Startled, Adelia confirms that she and Lord Fenon are childhood friends from well-acquainted families. The girl's smile sharpens as she thinks that Adelia chose to reveal this in front of her, the imperial princess. She innocently points out that since Lord Fenon is always with the Emperor, Adelia's claim is strange, demanding to know how she knows his schedule. Leaning forward slightly, she continues her interrogation, asking exactly who told Adelia about Lord Fenon's movements. With a triumphant glint in her eye, she accuses Adelia of keeping track of another woman's fiancé, leaving the blonde girl flushed with fury. The girl knows Adelia is lying. She heard directly from Lord Fenon that he isn't always with the Emperor. Adelia leaps to her feet, flustered and indignant, but the girl coolly remarks, "Wow, so you do know who you're talking to." Adelia freezes in shock as the girl's expression turns icy, thinking that Adelia has been incredibly rude from the very start. She calls out Adelia's earlier condescending remark, questioning why anyone who understood her royal position would assume a simple tea party is difficult. As Adelia stands speechless, the girl advises her to choose her words more carefully in the future if that wasn't her intention. Smiling sweetly, she warns that such words could easily cause misunderstandings. Having made her point, Luchia stands and announces her departure, leaving the other girls stunned into silence. She bids the party farewell, noting that Lady Adelia has plenty of company and thanking them for the invitation. Before departing, she promises the other guests she will remember their names, looking forward to their next meeting, which leaves them looking terrified. With a final piercing look, she bids a pointed farewell to the stunned Lady Adelia. Walking away through the garden, she thinks to herself, "Until next time." The scene shows her walking with quiet dignity toward her waiting carriage. Suddenly, a young woman in a green dress is seen running desperately, huffing and puffing as she tries to catch up. The woman in green reaches the princess just in time, panting with relief that she made it. Surprised by the interruption, the princess listens as the breathless young woman makes an earnest request. A quick flashback shows the princess's powerful exit from the tea party, leaving the other ladies intimidated. The woman in green, blushing with admiration, formally asks to serve as the princess's personal maid. The princess is utterly flabbergasted by this sudden and unexpected request. Later, the woman in green walks alongside Luchia, who seems to have accepted her company for now. Inside a lavish room, the princess is being attended to by her maid from the palace. The short-haired maid silently observes the princess with a thoughtful, concerned expression. Standing behind the princess, the headmaid calmly addresses her. The maid hesitantly asks if someone made fun of her outfit, prompting the princess to quickly deny it. The princess reassures her that the dress was stunning, thinking to herself that any lack of praise was because of her, not the beautiful gown. The maid gently notes that she saw Luchia was troubled and had been wondering what was wrong. A sudden realization strikes Luchia, and she turns to the maid with a new request. "Please let me serve as your lady-in-waiting." 1 week after the tea party, the maid who made the dress stands before the princess, formally accepting the position. Emily Noblesse. Background information reveals Emily is a baron's daughter whose family cannot oppose the Empress, which is why she acts like a maid. Luchia reflects on her initial hesitation to accept Emily, feeling unworthy, but recalls the events of the tea party. Remembering Emily helping her into the carriage, Luchia admits it felt like love at first sight. In the carriage, Emily bluntly analyzes Adelia's manipulative tactics, impressing Luchia with her sharp tongue and accurate assessment. Emily praises the princess's comeback, explaining that, for an unmarried lady, being slandered over a man is the worst possible insult. The red-haired maid blushes as Freya praises her, gushing that she's never seen someone leave Adelia so speechless. As Freya questions why a count's daughter is working as a maid, the light brown-haired girl smiles beside her. The girl explains it's common for nobles to gain experience this way and that it would be an honor to serve the princess. With a bright idea, Freya realizes the implications of this new information. In a flashback, the headmaid welcomes Lady Emily to the palace but sternly reminds her not to walk ahead of her master. The headmaid's sinister plan is revealed. She holds all authority and has been using Adelia to spread rumors about Freya. The flashback continues, showing Emily proposing a clever idea to Freya to frame her employment as Adelia's suggestion. Freya cleverly tells the head maid that Lady Adelia insisted on having Emily at the tea party, privately noting it's not exactly a lie. The head maid reluctantly agrees, conceding that it is a problem for the princess to have no personal maid. Freya realizes Adelia was just a puppet manipulated by the head maid to isolate and harm Luchia. Walking together again, Emily nervously asks Freya if the head maid has discovered their scheme. Freya looks back with a confident, knowing smile. She recalls Emily's brilliant strategy, using official channels to secure her position, making it difficult for the head maid to dismiss her. Freya appreciates her new ally, realizing how reassuring it is to have a knowledgeable strategist on her side in the treacherous palace. Suddenly, a troubling thought stops her. She wonders how the head maid knew Adelia was mistreating Luchia. She deduces that someone close to Luchia must be feeding the head maid information, confirming there's a spy who is after the real princess. Later, Emily confirms her suspicions about the wardrobe, stating that none of the dresses truly suit the princess's charm. Freya is shocked there are so many dresses, but Emily passionately argues that for her status, there aren't nearly enough. Emily insists the dresses are a waste of material and that Freya deserves a wardrobe that would make Adelia pale in comparison, as Lisette nods eagerly. Freya sits quietly, understanding that her preparations and wardrobe have been completely neglected. She grimly suspects the staff was deliberately instructed to do nothing for her. Turning to the red-haired maid, Freya offers a gentle smile and reassures her that she won't tell anyone. The maid, Lisette, looks down with a trembling lip, overwhelmed by either guilt or relief. Emily leaps to her feet, shocked by the revelation. Flustered, Emily thinks Lisette should have spoken up sooner, but Freya calmly gets her attention. Looking like a chastised puppy, Emily droops in embarrassment. Freya muses on how tightly the head maid controls the palace, using spies to isolate her and keep her weak. Gaining their attention, Freya looks toward Emily and Lisette. She puts a finger to her lips, smiling slyly as she asks them to keep the dress issue a secret between them for now. Meanwhile, the Emperor is lost in thought as his attendant, Alf, reports on state affairs, trying to get his attention. The Emperor stares blankly ahead, his mind clearly elsewhere. A faint vision of a smiling, blonde-haired woman appears before him. The Emperor quietly calls his attendant's name, and Alf immediately responds. As they walk, Freya's hand reaches out to stop the Emperor. She interrupts them, apologizing but insisting she needs to ask him something important. The Emperor coldly dismisses her, but Freya promises to leave as soon as she has her answer. Though his attendant questions her, Freya stands her ground, stating her query is vital. With newfound confidence, Freya places a hand over her heart, ready to ask her crucial question. She looks him in the eye and asks directly, "Is Windsor Palace under my control?" As she speaks, a ghostly image of the Emperor standing with the blonde-haired woman overlays the scene. A close-up reveals the gentle, smiling face of the blonde woman from his memory. Freya stands her ground, her expression resolute as she awaits his answer. The Emperor questions why she would ask something so obvious. With a disarming smile, Freya explains she needed to hear it from him no matter how silly it seemed. Thanking him, she quickly curtsies and departs, leaving a surprised Alf calling after her. The Emperor watches her go while his attendant remains completely baffled by the exchange. Freya walks away with purpose, her elegant dress trailing on the sparkling floor. The Emperor gazes after her, his expression thoughtful and unreadable. That night, the Emperor sits at his desk, writing by candlelight against a backdrop of a starry sky. He is lost in a memory of a blonde woman and a young girl in the snow, murmuring that he still remembers. The Emperor remembers the blonde-haired woman, recalling the vivid color of her golden eyes. Lost in thought, he sits alone, remembering how their eyes met earlier that day. He recalls Freya in her blue dress, realizing it was the first time in a long while he'd been reminded of the woman from his past. A memory of the blonde woman emerges, standing regal and serene among white roses in the snow. A narration explains that Luchia's mother, the former Empress Fraulet, was from the isolated but loyal northern territories. A bloody sword signifies the purges that put him on the throne. Fraulet was chosen as Empress for her lack of political ties, ensuring she couldn't conspire against him. Fraulet arrived at the palace with only 2 maids and few possessions, leading the Emperor to wonder if she planned for only one child to avoid succession disputes. He remembers her fearless smile as she called him an extreme man, and how her lack of fear was what surprised him most. In the memory, he sits with Fraulet and agrees to her wishes, telling her they can do it if it brings her peace. She vowed to become a person he could believe in, an unbreakable branch, as he watched her with a heavy heart. He reflects on his ruthless rise to power, eliminating all rivals, even family, and the rumors that he murdered the crown prince. Despite every reason to fear him, he remembers she was always smiling as he took her hand. He recalls that after their child was born, his focus on reforms meant they hardly spent any time together as a family. Then, one day she suddenly died of illness, and he saw their daughter again for the first time in a long while. He remembers seeing young Luchia, whose terrified golden eyes didn't resemble her mother's at all. The fear in his daughter's eyes only grew, so he had her removed from the palace, and her presence in his life gradually faded. He remembers the moment he decided to stop thinking about her altogether, his hands framing her in his memory. Back in the present, he sits at his desk, wondering why she is suddenly on his mind now. He recalls his recent encounter with Freya in the palace hallway. Questioning why he's thinking of her now, his memory flashes back to the moment Freya took his hand. A new day begins at the sunlit palace as a voice wishes a good morning. Freya reflects that a month has passed since she took Luchia's place as two maids greet her politely. She smiles, pleased that her efforts are working as more staff members greet her kindly, some even initiating conversation. Believing that relationships start with a simple greeting, she walks on, feeling hopeful. As she walks down the hall, she nearly bumps into a stern-looking older nobleman. The man apologizes, but Freya cheerfully says it's fine. He seems flustered and quickly leaves. The man glances back with a scowl, thinking she shouldn't get carried away, as Freya realizes some people are still closed off to her. Later, while Freya is reading, Emily informs her that someone has arrived. The headmaid enters, accusing Freya of wasting time wandering the halls instead of studying, confirming she remains a major obstacle. Freya calmly counters that she has been studying, and questions if there's an issue with her speaking to the maids. Though the headmaid concedes the point, she patronizingly criticizes Freya for having too much free time, implying a lack of self-awareness. The headmaid escalates her attack, claiming Freya's manners have become sloppy and referring to her as the commoner, causing Freya to tremble in silent anger. The headmaid warns that her current conduct is unacceptable for public appearances, and will make people question who the real princess is. With a sinister smile, she advises Freya not to disgrace herself, leaving Freya glaring after her. After the headmaid leaves, Emily and another maid stand by, flustered by the confrontation. The grand doors slam shut, marking the headmaid's departure. Freya mutters about the vile woman under her breath, while Emily looks on in stunned confusion. Emily suddenly erupts in fury, shouting about the headmaid's insolence and threatening to take her head off as Freya tries to calm her down. Clenching her fist, Emily seethes that she would have crushed the headmaid if not for Freya's order to stay quiet. Thinking that nobles are scary, Freya sighs with a weary smile while Emily anxiously asks if she's all right with being treated that way. Freya reassures her, but admits that she doesn't know how much she can change things while acting as Luchia. She explains her dilemma. She wants to make things comfortable for Luchia's return, but fears changing too much will complicate it. Anxious about her uncertain timeline, she dismisses writing a letter about her dangerous situation and asks to resume their lessons. Freya reflects on how Emily has been an excellent tutor, teaching her about noble society and politics. She is grateful that Emily has never questioned her ignorance, simply accepting it without judgment. Freya feels a pang of guilt for deceiving Emily, who likely assumes Luchia's isolated upbringing is the cause, but Emily changes the subject, asking about charity work. Flustered by the question, Freya remembers looking into education programs for her little brother but quickly deflects, saying it was nothing important. Emily offers to bring related documents from her family's territory, and mentions that Freya has the next day off, leaving her confused. In disbelief, Emily asks if the princess has truly forgotten about her important appointment tomorrow. Emily reveals the appointment is with Lord Fenon as Freya's surprised face is reflected in her teacup. In a sun-drenched memory, A man in an ornate green uniform gently holds a woman's hands. A sudden jolt of realization causes a woman's hand to spill her teacup. Emily panics, realizing she forgot something crucial, her mind flashing to a somber-looking Lord Fenon. The scene shifts to the day of horseback riding, where the princess waits with a confident smile. A man in a formal red coat approaches, addressing her as princess. As he asks if she is ready to go, Luchia blushes, feeling awkward that it's just the two of them. The carriage driver waits patiently as the horses stand ready to depart. Inside the carriage, an uncomfortable silence stretches between the princess and the man. To escape the awkwardness, the princess decides to just watch the scenery pass by. As she fidgets nervously, the man watches her with a serious, unreadable expression. Stepping out of the carriage, Luchia is awestruck by the beautiful estate, her worries about the silent ride momentarily forgotten. A stable hand reassures them that most of the horses are older, gentle, and well-behaved. He guarantees they won't get thrown off, but the princess worries it would be sad to ride such old horses. Surprised by her compassion, the man gently pets a horse's muzzle. He clarifies that the horses are retired from military service and are still perfectly capable of being ridden in parades. Lucia's face lights up with understanding and relief. She observes that he smiles at horses, just as he turns to ask if she's bothered by the stable's smell. She cheerfully says she's fine, comparing the smell to cows and leaving him looking utterly confused. In a flustered panic, she claims she read it in a book and quickly points out that her horse is here. A stable hand presents an especially calm horse and asks if she is ready, but the princess looks a little overwhelmed. She takes a deep breath, her eyes sparkling with a mix of excitement and nervousness. She approaches the tall horse, formally introducing herself. Finding the horse adorable, she gently pets its face, placing her trust in the animal. Realizing the horse's height, she wonders aloud how she's supposed to get on. The man leans in close from behind her, whispering for her to pardon him for a moment. He places a firm hand on her waist. With a slight smile, he effortlessly lifts her into the air and onto the saddle. The princess is left utterly speechless and blushing furiously from the sudden intimate contact. He gently guides her hands to the reins, helping her get settled. Noticing her stunned silence, he asks her what's wrong. Mortified, Luchia waves her hands dismissively, insisting nothing is wrong while recalling the intimate moment. He asks if his actions made her uncomfortable, and she immediately denies it. She explains that she was only surprised and it wasn't unpleasant at all. Relieved, he gives her a warm smile, glad to hear it. The princess blushes and turns away, thinking that his charming smile is simply cheating. He advises her to face forward, as horses can sense a rider's nervousness, and she quickly agrees. He asks if she's ready to go, and after her confirmation, they set off on their ride. As they ride through the woods, she thinks about how gentle the horse is, making it easy for a beginner like her. She beams, feeling a sense of freedom and peace while enjoying the fresh air as the man watches her contentedly. Noticing the darkening clouds, he suggests they should probably start heading back. Though she agrees, she looks disappointed, wishing she could have ridden for just a little longer. He offers to bring her again sometime, which catches her by pleasant surprise. Suddenly, a downpour erupts from the sky, startling them both. Seeking shelter, he calmly assesses the situation, guessing it's just a passing shower. He chivalrously drapes his cloak over her shoulders, asking if she is all right. She thanks him as he brushes the damp hair from his face, looking a bit disheveled but still handsome. Noticing her staring, he asks if something is wrong. Winking playfully, Luchia tells him he reminds her of a wet puppy, just like her brothers, though his size makes him more of a big dog. His red eyes widen, taken aback by her unexpected and affectionate teasing. He apologizes sincerely, blaming himself for inviting her and getting her caught in the rain. In the rain, Freya tells the somber Lord Ordval not to apologize, as the weather isn't his fault. Leaning in with a smile, she insists she should apologize for getting him stuck taking shelter with her. Lord Ordval thinks he only stopped because she can't ride at full speed, but tells her he was the one who invited her. Freya happily admits she had fun, despite getting soaked, and he questions her surprising cheerfulness. She reflects on how she'd been overworking herself and that this outing was a much-needed chance to unwind. Beaming with genuine gratitude, she thanks him again for the invitation. He looks at her with a puzzled expression, prompting her to ask if something is wrong. He tells her she doesn't have to use his formal title, leaving her momentarily stunned. When he reminds her that she used to call him by his first name, she freezes in a moment of sheer panic. Realizing her mistake, Freya quickly blames the maids for the formality, claiming she just picked up the habit from them. Hesitantly, she tries again, softly calling him by his first name, Fenon. Visibly moved, Fenon looks away as Freya worries she has messed up yet again. Overcome with emotion, Fenon covers his mouth and assures her that it's perfectly fine. A flashback to 1 year ago shows their reflection in a puddle, marking their first formal meeting after the engagement. In silhouette, Fenon kneels before the princess on her throne, formally greeting Her Highness with honor. He reflects that even then, a deep, irreparable rift already existed between them. He understood the Emperor sought only her bloodline, not her talent, and knew she must have guessed the engagement's true purpose. In his eyes, their relationship was nothing more than a scripted performance, with both of them as mere puppets. Consequently, he believed their monthly meetings were simply a duty to be fulfilled, not a genuine connection. Back in the present, Freya decides to break the silence by asking Fenon about his work attending noble council meetings. Standing beside a tree, Fenon gives a simple, affirmative reply. He praises the Emperor's impressive judgment, which makes him realize how inexperienced he still is. Surprised, Freya admits she thought the Emperor was a unilateral ruler, but Fenon corrects her, stating that approach is now too dangerous. Freya concludes the Emperor has a surprising sense of balance, earning a newfound respect for the man she thought was arrogant. A thought suddenly strikes her, and she asks Fenon if he isn't the eldest son. She presses on, questioning if he wasn't originally supposed to succeed the duchy. Her final question, whether being engaged to her bothered him, visibly troubles Fenon. Freya wonders if he secretly harbors ambition for the more glamorous royal throne. Blushing, she immediately regrets her forwardness, wondering if she asked a bad question. Fenon looks down with a pained expression, saying that his future is not his to decide. He apologizes on her behalf and insists he has no complaints, calling it an honor to be chosen as her partner. He adds that his studies for the duchy haven't gone to waste, but Freya silently questions if his perfect answer reflects his true feelings. She muses that just as her future was decided for her, Fenon must feel the same sense of powerlessness. Imagining the lively freedom of commoners, Freya realizes why Luchia enjoys that life so much. Stepping forward with purpose, she asks Fenon if there is anything he truly wants to do for himself. Fenon dismisses her question, stating he has too many obligations to waste time on meaningless activities. His answer leaves Freya disheartened, realizing he only values his duties. Noticing the rain has stopped, Freya suggests with a smile that they should head back. Now back on their horses, they both agree it's good the sky cleared so quickly. Freya feels a wave of awkwardness, worrying that she said something strange again. She reflects that while she once thought nobles were free, she now sees both Luchia and Fenon are bound by invisible chains. Looking onward, she ponders the importance of dreams and enjoying life beyond just duty and succession. Fenon rides slightly ahead, his back to her as he looks toward the clearing forest. A brilliant rainbow appears in the sky, and Freya points it out with childlike excitement. Fenon turns to look, quietly acknowledging that she's right. Freya watches him, momentarily lost for words. She then asks him directly if he considered sheltering from the rain a waste of time. As they ride through a sun-dappled field, she tells him that only he can decide what has meaning. He looks back, touched, as she explains that the inconvenient rain had meaning because it led them to this moment together. Fenon gazes at her, his expression softening as he takes in her words. Riding horseback with a dark-haired young man, the white-haired girl happily declares she had a wonderful time today. She smiles and thanks him, calling him Fenoa, which catches the surprised young man off guard. Together, they ride their horses side by side into the bright, sparkling woods. As a grand estate comes into view, A voice welcomes His Highness back home. Fenon gravely confirms his return as a servant notes he's soaking wet and offers to prepare a change of clothes immediately. Now in a loose shirt, Fenon dries his hair, thinking he has finally figured out what the strange feeling was. He recalls the princess, realizing that until today, she had never once asked about him or shown any interest. With a thoughtful expression, he concludes that she simply never had the emotional room to do so. Thinking back on their past meetings, he remembers how she was always overwhelmed by her own struggles. He understood the pressure she felt, recalling her lashing out, and realized it was from a feeling of inadequacy. His introspection reveals that all he had ever felt for her before was simple sympathy. Returning to the present, he admits that while he doesn't know why, something about her has definitely changed. A memory of her bright smile plays in his mind as he thinks her voice keeps lingering in his ears. Clasping his hands, he acknowledges that her voice brings him a certain, unexpected comfort. With a faint blush, he admits to himself that her changed demeanor threw him off just a little. Elsewhere, a maid tells the white-haired princess about the summer solstice festival, and another maid asks if she forgot, panicking about the time. The title for the summer solstice festival is displayed against a bright blue sky filled with doves. A narration explains that it is one of Altresia's seasonal celebrations, held at the start of summer. The festival is a time to give thanks for surviving the harsh winter, and to celebrate the early spring harvest. It also serves as a prayer for a bountiful autumn harvest, a fact the princess proudly recalls from a book. Her maid, Lisette, offers to let the princess try her family's perfumes for the festival, as the princess realizes it's a kind gesture for her outdated belongings. The princess gratefully accepts Lisette's offer, causing the maid to flush with happiness. When the princess worries about using items meant for sale, Lisette assures her that her family would be proud to provide their best products. A blonde girl in a blue dress enters, cheerfully asking if they're discussing the festival, and the princess confirms they were talking about perfume. The blonde girl enthusiastically joins in, eager to discuss brands, while another maid watches with a blank expression. The princess's attention is suddenly drawn to a vision of the Empress in a stunning purple gown, causing her to wonder. The blonde girl questions the mention of the Empress, thinking Luchia's mother passed away, but Luchia just smiles, acknowledging her friend's observation. The girl suggests that with the Empress absent, Luchia might be the one to partner with the Emperor for the opening dance. Luchia panics at the thought, while her friend Emily swoons, and a thought bubble notes there's no time for her antics. A narrator describes life in a small, isolated farming village, a stark contrast to the royal court, where news was scarce. Since the emperor lost his wife at a young age, it was only natural that others encouraged him to remarry. Emily clarifies that the Empress is still around, but her return was delayed due to her father's poor health. The girl in Lucia's body realizes the Empress must have left before she switched places, which is why she never knew. Emily tries to comfort her, noting her pale complexion and suggesting dancing with the Emperor would be nerve-wracking, but the girl is just confused. The horrifying realization strikes her. The cold-blooded Emperor is going to be her dance partner. Huff ha! 3 days later, a hooded Luchia hurries breathlessly through a crowded town. She apologizes to a red-haired girl named Saria for the crazy request of borrowing her day off, but Saria is just honored to help the princess. With a wink, Lucia reassures her it's fine, explaining she's slipped out before and knows the lower city well. She recalls sending a message via her bird, Chateau, immediately after Emily's comment, deciding she had reached her limit and needed to act. She adamantly declares that being the Emperor's dance partner is absolutely impossible. She recounts her plan, checking Saria's schedule, having Lisette provide cover, and pretending to be in the library before sneaking out. Hiding behind some barrels, the hooded girl watches a delivery arrive, thinking her escape was easier than expected. The scene shifts to show the exterior of a charming, half-timbered building. As the hooded girl ascends a staircase, someone's thoughts note that Luchia was supposed to have the day off. A girl in a yellow dress warmly welcomes Freya, and the hooded girl thinks to herself that she's finally met Luchia again. Ha ha ha. Freya laughs at how bold the new Luchia was, but the girl protests that she nearly had a heart attack from the stress. Freya doubles over in laughter, wishing she could have seen the headmaid's face, much to the other girl's exasperation. Freya points out it's easy for her to say, since she's not the cursed princess, but then dismisses the argument by saying no one knows the truth. Changing the subject, Freya excitedly announces she's been put in charge of the next embroidery design, shocking the other girl. With a confident smile, Freya thinks that with a bit of creativity, she can still design something cute. A young girl with white hair and a green ribbon nervously asks her identical counterpart how far away an event is. Her counterpart, Luchia, sits on her bed and guesses it's about a month away, a realization that leaves her utterly shocked. The scene transitions to a quaint, timber-framed building in a village. Sigh. In the village, a cloaked Freya despairs, as bystanders wonder what's wrong, lamenting that this is not how she expected things to go. She grumbles that she thought Luchia would hate commoner life, but instead she's thriving and has turned Freya into an errand girl. As Freya worries about needing to switch back before the festival, a familiar voice calls out her name. Eek! Startled, Freya turns to see the tailor's wife, who warmly asks if she's out shopping. Freya confirms she is, and the tailor's wife notes with a smile that she seems much more used to shopping now. The woman brings up Freya's supposed head injury and memory loss from a month ago, causing Freya to panic internally, blaming Luchia. Freya quickly bows an apology for her past behavior, but the kind woman tells her to not worry about it. The tailor's wife expresses her relief at seeing Freya doing well now, recalling how unstable she seemed when she first arrived a month ago. As Freya listens in confusion, the woman recalls being shocked when Freya started crying after being complimented on her embroidery. In a flashback, the woman remembers discussing with her husband how Freya might have never been praised before in her life. The tailor's wife concludes by saying she's glad Freya seems happier lately and encourages her to keep doing her best. Freya thoughtfully processes this new information as she watches the bustling life of the town square around her. Her thoughts flash through memories of the Emperor and the treacherous imperial court, wondering about the implications of Luchia being left alone there. With a newfound resolve, Freya stands determined in the middle of the street, clutching her cloak. While walking with her purchase, she reaffirms her desire to return to her normal life, away from danger. However, she pauses, considering that the imperial palace is now in a better state than before. She remembers Luchia's past, surrounded by thorny threats and pointed blades, completely isolated and without allies. Freya recalls the oppressive environment where everyone showed malice toward Luchia, making it hard for her to even breathe. With a grimace, Freya's expression hardens with determination. Returning home, Freya is greeted by an excited Luchia, who welcomes her back and urges her to look at something. Luchia proudly displays a beautiful fabric adorned with purple flowers and butterflies, leaving Freya momentarily breathless at its beauty. Freya admires the lovely fabric, and Luchia smugly agrees that it's wonderful. Freya worries she'd have to learn embroidery too, recalling that she is known as the clumsiest person, and that her brothers forbid her from sewing. Shaking off the thought, Freya confronts Luchia, demanding to know what the woman in town meant by memory loss, confusing Luchia. Luchia launches into a complaint about how empty Freya's house was, ending with a passionate rant about the life of luxury nobles like Freya must lead. She abruptly cuts herself off, reconsidering her words as Freya watches. Luchia admits that despite the emptiness, she found one beautiful thing, revealing a delicate, bird-shaped golden pin in a small box. Freya's eyes widen with emotion as she recognizes the pin, whispering a name, Lim. Holding up the box, Luchia explains that the pin is a keepsake from her mother. Freya smiles gently at the mention of her mother, a reaction that surprises Luchia. A soft memory of a blonde woman holding a baby appears as Luchia quietly confirms that the pin was indeed from her mother. Later, as they drink together, Freya wonders why Luchia's attitude remains unchanged despite their situation. Freya reflects that even though she forced an unreasonable task upon Luchia, the girl is still kind to her. She thinks about how Luchia must be fed up with being a temporary princess, yet still puts on a brave face to fix things despite being hated. Luchia interrupts her thoughts, calling out her name. Sitting across from her, Luchia asks what Freya must have heard about her in the imperial palace. Freya clenches her fist, wondering if Luchia is looking down on her for being unable to satisfy anyone's expectations. Yes, Freya answers, her gaze steady as Lucia listens. In a surprising gesture, Lucia reaches across and gently takes Freya's hand. Lucia looks at Freya with empathy as she holds her hand. Comparing her own painful life as a caged bird surrounded by snakes, Lucia shows she understands Freya's suffering. Freya explains that her mother died from overwork 2 years ago, sharing that though their situations are different, she understands Lucia's pain. Her tragic story continues with memories of her father's debts and violent nature, which affected her and her brothers. Freya recalls the pain of having no one to help her, a feeling that made her almost give up on trusting others. She then turns to Lucia and asks a simple question. Is it fun being here? Freya remembers how Lucia seemed just as lost as she once was, and how she couldn't bring herself to leave her alone. Lucia smiles, replying that it is fun because everyone accepts her, and that she endured her past by holding on to her mother's love. As memories of a lonely childhood flash by, Freya asks the new Lucia to swap places for just a little while longer. The girl in Lucia's body is stunned speechless by Freya's unexpected request. Freya confidently declares the headmaid is to blame and vows to increase their allies so Lucia can return more easily. Freya gives her the option to come back any time, but proposes a plan to do something by the summer solstice festival, which the girl quietly accepts. The girl in Lucia's body stumbles back in flustered acceptance, much to Freya's amusement. As the girl leans against her, Freya smiles warmly, thinking to herself how endearing this princess is. The two share a tender moment, smiling together as the girl in Lucia's body agrees with a simple, yeah. Later, Lucia and Saria walk toward the palace as Saria thanks her. Lucia reassures her she planned to return by evening anyway. Walking alone, Lucia wonders if the Emperor is the key to her plans, but realizes she was too preoccupied to notice the dangers around her. Saria meets her, suggesting a safer back entrance, but Lucia starts to explain about Lisette, unaware of the unseen threads of conspiracy in the palace. A sharp voice calls out, "Milady," and both Lucia and Saria freeze in shock at the approaching maid. The headmaid appears with her guards, and Lucia panics, realizing she's been caught sneaking out again. A guard confronts them, accusing Lucia of being unaware of her position as he reaches for Saria. "Kaya!" Saria cries out as the guard violently grabs her arm. The guard cruelly shoves Saria to the ground. "What?" As another guard restrains Lucia, she shouts in disbelief, demanding to know what they're doing. The headmaid coldly orders for that to be brought out, and Lucia watches in horror as a whip is presented. Eek, Saria trembles on the ground as the headmaid mockingly asks what she's so scared of. The headmaid declares that this is a fitting punishment for a maid who deceived the princess. While guards hold Lucia back, the headmaid lectures that she has repeatedly warned the princess to be aware of her station. With a cold expression, the headmaid says her warnings went unheard. The headmaid smiles maliciously as she prepares to punish Saria, telling a horrified Lucia that it can't be helped. Alone in her room, Lucia stares out the window, her bandaged hand pressed against the cold glass. In a flashback, Lucia yells, "Wait!" and demands they let Saria go, ordering her frightened friend to step back. Lucia calmly instructs Saria to obey, while the headmaid scoffs, asking what she thinks she's doing. Declaring she'll take the punishment herself, Lucia shocks both Saria and the headmaid. Lucia stares down the headmaid with fiery eyes, challenging her by asking if there's a problem with her decision. With a smug smile, the headmaid accepts Lucia's offer, saying, "Very well." 3 days later, Lucia remains in confinement, reflecting on how the maids now avoid her and the palace atmosphere has grown heavy. She realizes her mistake. Lisette and Saria were fired immediately, and she hadn't understood the true threat the headmaid posed. She laments that trying to make allies was pointless, as the headmaid's absolute authority meant she could fire anyone who supported the princess. Lucia understands that the maids, seeking income and honor, would never risk their futures by opposing the headmaid's power. Looking at her bandaged hand, she realizes that the experienced Lisette must have known the danger all along. She clenches her fist, thinking that this incident is precisely why her resolve has been set from the very beginning. Tying a sheet to her balcony, Luchia decides she needs an ally in an important position. Her thoughts turn to Vincent, the head butler, who holds authority equal to the head maids. She recalls that Vincent is the only one who can challenge the head maid's decisions, but it's too late to build a relationship now. The original Luchia's voice explains that her mother recruited Vincent from a commoner's academy for his intelligence. As she finishes tying her escape rope, Lucia prepares to climb down, hoping her guess about Vincent is right. Elsewhere, the head butler, Vincent, confirms with another servant that it has been 3 days since the princess's confinement. Vincent sighs, thinking that while the dismissals were a deterrent, the palace atmosphere will sour again just as it was starting to improve. As the head maid approaches, Vincent admits to himself that he'd had expectations for the princess's recent changes. He reflects on her new, unwavering stance and her kindness to the staff, which reminded him of the late Empress. A brief, reverent vision shows the back of the long-haired, blonde Empress. Vincent concludes the princess's actions were reckless, as she is powerless without her father's love, yet admits a small part of him still held hope. He's startled by a sound and turns to see Luchia has suddenly appeared, welcoming her back in utter shock. Luchia stands before him with fierce determination, reaching out her hand. Standing at the top of a grand staircase, Vincent looks down in disbelief, asking how on earth she got there. He panics, realizing she must have come from the window, and frets over the danger, which makes Luchia realize he's worried for her. Luchia smiles, knowing she made the right choice, and tells him he is the first person to worry for her safety. Confronted by the white-haired princess, the head butler asks what she's doing as she begins her accusation. In a flashback, the butler realizes with a jolt that for 30 years, the princess has been feigning ignorance. Annoyed, the butler demands to know what she is trying to say, but she calmly offers to be clear. She accuses him of having the same authority as the head maid, yet ignoring the unjust dismissal of servants. He reflects on a past dismissal, admitting it was unfair but justified at the time, as the princess was powerless to show her anger. He looks at her incredulously, questioning if she is truly upset over a few trivial servants. She clenches her fist, reminding him of the severe consequences a sudden dismissal has on a servant and their entire family. Freya erupts in anger, declaring that their status as commoners doesn't give him the right to ruin their lives. The butler stands with his back to her, a vision of his younger self appearing faintly before him. In a memory, his younger, blonde-haired self assures someone that their commoner status doesn't matter. Freya directly asks for his opinion, demanding to know if he believes the dismissals were unjust. Turning away with a weary sigh, Freya decides to rephrase her question to him. She challenges the butler Vincent to declare his true master, her or the head maid, whose reflection appears menacingly below. Vincent recalls his past duty to protect Lady Luchia, a lady-in-waiting who left the palace after marrying. He remembers how, after losing Luchia's support, he felt overwhelmed by the headmaid's power and simply followed her orders. He admits his disappointment in the princess, who he thought was lashing out at servants because of her own failings. With an image of a confident, blonde-haired woman behind her, Freya looks forward with steely determination. Vincent kneels before Freya, confessing he was wrong to be disappointed in her, and acknowledges that she is his master. Looking down at the kneeling Vincent, Freya accepts his pledge of loyalty as he addresses her, "Your Highness." 10 days after the princess's confinement, the headmaid muses that while the palace is quiet again, Freya was quite a headache. Walking down the hall, the headmaid recalls that the princess's strange behavior began after her trip to town. The headmaid smirks, assuming the princess was merely irritated by the vile commoners, a thought she finds amusing. She confidently walks to meet the princess, believing it will follow the usual pattern of a defeated royal begging for forgiveness. In the darkness of her thoughts, the headmaid relishes the idea of someone superior yielding to her. She finds the power to make a royal bend to her will intoxicating, and expects this time to be no different. The headmaid enters the room, surprised to find both the princess and the head butler waiting for her. She wonders why the head butler is present, as she formally asks the princess what she requires. Freya addresses her as Lady Imelda Mathis and informs her that she is being removed as headmaid of Windsor Palace. Dressed in a new, formal blue gown, Freya stands with an air of newfound authority. In a flashback from 7 days ago, a weary Vincent listens as Freya asks to see the palace ledgers. Freya explains that simply rehiring the dismissed maids won't solve the root of the problem. She clarifies that the real issue is the head maid, prompting a shocked Vincent to ask if she intends to dismiss her. Freya confirms her plan, acknowledging that while the head maid is backed by the Empress, they must remove her completely. Vincent understands why she needs the ledgers, and Freya asserts with certainty that the head maid has done wrong. She explains her basis. With full control over the enormous palace budget for 10 years, anyone would be tempted by corruption. Freya declares that it would be strange if someone as proud as the head maid hadn't embezzled funds, and then she calls for Vincent. Over a cup of tea, Freya tells Vincent they must settle the matter quickly, as they are short on time. Freya reveals that he already knows the truth, and a visibly shaken Vincent agrees to bring the ledgers immediately. As he leaves, Vincent reflects that he felt as though he were witnessing a caterpillar transforming into a butterfly. Freya's golden eyes burn with resolve, signaling her complete transformation. Vincent presents 3 years of records, and Freya immediately begins her search, targeting regular expenses with inflated costs. With a cunning smile, Freya points to the ledger, suggesting they investigate her own dress tailoring fees. Vincent watches in awe as the narration explains how the princess unraveled a web of misconduct from a single clue. Praised for her flawless insight, Freya instructs Vincent to contact the tailor, leaving him to wonder why no one else ever noticed. Standing tall in her blue gown, Freya looks ready to deliver her final judgment. Returned to the present, the head maid laughs mockingly, accusing the princess of having lost her mind. Freya calmly calls out to Vincent, who steps forward with a ledger in hand. She presents the documents as proof of the head maid's embezzlement over the past 3 years, leaving Imelda stunned. Freya states they have enough evidence for dismissal and warns that embezzling royal assets is a crime, but Imelda frantically denies it. Imelda claims she's being framed, but Freya calmly dismisses the idea, leaving the head maid to silently plot her next move. A trembling Imelda reluctantly agrees to reverse the dismissal of the 2 maids, asking if that will be acceptable. Freya mocks her, asking if she seriously still believes she holds any authority and states she doesn't need her approval. Imelda shouts back that Freya can't do this, as she was entrusted with the palace directly by Her Majesty the Empress. Smiling sweetly, Freya corrects her, declaring that the mistress of the palace is not the Empress, but herself, a fact she confirmed with her father. With an image of the Emperor behind her, Freya challenges Imelda, asking if she's claiming His Majesty lied before ordering her to leave and never return. Vincent raises his hand, signaling to the guards standing by. As 2 guards seize the former head maid, Imelda struggles and screams, demanding to know what right they have. Freya calmly informs the struggling Imelda that an invoice for the total amount she embezzled will be sent to her home, stunning her into silence. Offering a final mocking kindness, Freya says that if Imelda pays by the deadline, she'll avoid further charges, leaving the maid to despair over the impossible sum. As Freya turns away, Vincent watches her, thinking to himself what a terrifying girl she has become. Vincent reflects that in just 7 days, Freya has achieved the impossible, as he watches Imelda being dragged away. Looking at the terrified face of the departing Imelda, he marvels that Freya uprooted a corruption that had infested the palace for 9 long years. Freya bids Imelda a final, cheerful take care, as Vincent realizes she has completely and utterly eradicated the problem. Their departure is interrupted by guards announcing the arrival of His Majesty the Emperor, and Imelda sees a glimmer of hope. The Emperor coldly asks for business as Imelda desperately pleads her case, claiming she was unjustly dismissed by the princess on false charges. Imelda argues that for the princess to expel someone appointed by the Empress would only tarnish her own reputation after 9 years of loyal service. With glowing eyes, the Emperor says he understands. his mind flashing to an image of a single chess pawn as Imelda looks on in terror. The image of a glowing white king chess piece solidifies the Emperor's decision. Imelda calls out hopefully to the Emperor, who emotionlessly orders the guards to throw her out, crushing her last hope. As she's dragged away screaming, a brown-haired man asks the Emperor if this is truly acceptable, but he coolly replies that it doesn't matter. The Emperor looks on with a faint, satisfied smile. The scene shifts to an aerial view of the palace grounds. Vincent calls out to Freya as she stands on the balcony. With the former headmaid gone, a triumphant Freya smiles, knowing her plans can now proceed. Just as planned, the two dismissed maids, Lisette and Saria, return to the palace. Freya turns to warmly welcome the two young women back. Freya comforts a tearful Lisette, while Saria beams with gratitude, and she then gently teases them for their past honesty as Vincent watches with a smile. Emily, who had been suspended from duty, also returns, and the maids in service begin to notice a positive shift in the palace atmosphere. The sun shines brightly on the palace's vibrant garden. As early summer approaches, another significant change comes to the princess's palace. A new headmaid is appointed, arriving at the palace doors with her luggage. Freya, flanked by Vincent and the rehired maids, stands ready to greet the newcomer. The new headmaid walks in confidently and introduces herself as Sheena. Sheena warmly greets Freya, calling her Lady Luchia, and remarks that it's been a while, though she now looks completely different. A series of flashbacks reveals that Sheena served the late Empress and was entrusted to look after a young Luchia after her mother passed away. Sheena remarks that Luchia was only 5 and wouldn't remember, but Freya recalls a memory of a girl who fell into a pond. A flashback shows Vincent urgently sending a letter to Sheena, a trusted acquaintance, who accepted the position without hesitation. Sheena thinks about all the hardships the princess has endured, imagining her as a powerful figure supported by her big 2 top retainers. Curtsying deeply, Sheena apologizes for leaving Her Highness to face such difficult times alone. Vincent assures Freya that he is certain Sheena will be a great source of strength to her. Freya listens thoughtfully while Sheena looks down with a solemn, perhaps regretful, expression. Freya realizes that if Sheena served the late Empress, she must have known the real Luchia since birth and genuinely cared for her. A spark of recognition hits Sheena as she looks at Freya. Freya laughs and cheerfully quotes a saying that it's good to face hardships when you're young. The phrase triggers a memory of the real Luchia saying something similar. Noticing Sheena's surprise, Freya asks if something is the matter, and Sheena replies that her way of speaking reminded her of an old friend. Sheena smiles warmly, her heart seemingly touched by the reminder. Freya narrates that ever since Sheena returned, her daily life has become a whirlwind of retraining in court etiquette. A montage of chibi-style lessons shows Freya's rigorous training, ending with her looking exhausted during a break. Freya laments that Luchia refused to switch places before the festival, leaving no time to swap back, just as an energetic Sheena calls for another round of lessons. Freya listens with a grimace as Sheena scolds her for a clumsy curtsy, privately blaming the previous headmaid for her lack of proper education. Later, while strolling through the central garden, Freya is surprised to see the Emperor sitting alone, as she believed the area was restricted. Startled, she rushes towards him as he turns to acknowledge her approach. Freya comes to a halt, shocked to be face to face with the Emperor. The Emperor remains seated, exuding a cool and regal aura in his ornate attire. Composing herself, Freya performs a graceful curtsy and formally greets His Majesty. As she rises, she decides to take her leave immediately to avoid any trouble. The Emperor stops her, initially saying he'll leave, but then unexpectedly asks about how things are at her palace. His sudden interest leaves Freya stunned and speechless. He specifically asks about her replacing the head maid, surprising Freya, who thought he was never interested in such matters. The Emperor calmly watches her reaction, his expression unreadable. A nervous Freya wonders if her decision was a mistake. She reasons that he's likely concerned with palace operations, not her personally, but assures herself that the transition was handled smoothly. The emperor reassures her that the palace is hers to manage as she sees fit. His response leaves Freya comically baffled, wondering why he even brought it up. The narration soberly reminds the audience that this man is Luchia's father. A painful memory surfaces of the real Luchia, desperately wanting her father's love. Freya reflects on how this unrequited desire for affection continuously hurt the real Lucia. She looks at the emperor and wonders if he is truly so uninterested in his own daughter. The emperor's gaze remains fixed on her, his thoughts hidden. Freya recalls the words of the late Empress, that no flower can bloom perfectly from the start. In a memory, the late Empress explains that a flower must be nurtured with water and care. The emperor finishes the thought, stating that this is how a flower eventually blooms beautifully. A warm, distant memory shows a white-haired man affectionately patting the head of a happy younger white-haired boy. The emperor's expression darkens with a touch of melancholy. His cryptic monologue leaves Freya utterly bewildered. The emperor suddenly stands, dismissing the topic and preparing to leave. A confused Freya calls out for him to wait, wanting an explanation. He continues to walk away, seemingly ignoring her call. He stops and turns, asking what she wants, as a flustered Freya struggles to find her words. Internally, Freya screams at herself to overcome her hesitation and just ask her question. She finally blurts out a question about the summer solstice festival, catching the emperor's attention. Freya asks if she is truly his dance partner for the festival, silently praying the answer is no. To her horror, the emperor calmly confirms that it is true. The confirmation hits her like a physical blow as she thinks, no way. She stumbles back, overwhelmed and desperately wishing this was just a bad dream. The emperor watches her panic with a faint, knowing smirk. Having dropped the bombshell, the emperor turns and walks away. His brown-haired aide catches up to him, questioning the decision by reminding him that Lady Eva was supposed to be his partner. With a confident smile, the emperor declares that he is the one who makes the decisions. He dismisses his aide's concern, ordering him to simply make the arrangements, leaving the man shocked. The emperor and his aide walk down the grand, sun-drenched palace corridor. Back in the conservatory, Freya lies defeated on a table, refusing to accept the reality of the situation while her maids look on. Lisette tries to cheer her up, calling the dance wonderful, but Freya groans that the dance itself is the problem. Lisette fantasizes about the romantic image of the princess dancing with the emperor, calling it pure eye candy. While Lisette is lost in her fantasy, Freya sees the situation as a life-or-death crisis, comically weighing her crimes on a divine scale. As Freya wishes for someone to take her place, Sheena approaches the table, interrupting her lament. A serious-looking young man with brown hair and red eyes appears behind Sheena, startling Freya as she looks up. A close-up reveals the solemn expression of the mysterious newcomer. Sheena asks Freya what's wrong, just as Lisette and Saria gasp in surprise at the handsome visitor. The princess panics, asking a brown-haired man if she forgot a promise, but he gently tells her that's not it. Flinch. The man mentions hearing of her recent troubles and notes it's their first meeting since they were children. Luchia smiles sweetly, asking the red-eyed man if he was worried about her. A small, private smile graces his lips as he thinks to himself, "I'm happy." Beaming with genuine joy, Luchia thanks him warmly. She suggests they have tea, but as she turns away, he calls out, "Princess?" in surprise. Whirling back around, Luchia startles him by grabbing his hands and calling him Fenon. With a mischievous glint in her eyes, she asks Fen if he's free after this. Tick. The scene shifts to the rhythmic ticking of a metronome. In a grand ballroom, Luchia and Fenon are now dancing, his expression calm and focused. Fenon confirms her request to be her dance practice partner, to which she quietly agrees. As they glide across the floor, he recalls that he has only danced with her once before. His memory flashes back to the emperor's birthday party 6 months prior, where he'd thought her dancing wasn't too bad. He remembers how her steps were exceptionally careful and precise, as though she feared failure above all else. Back in the present, music notes swirl as they continue their dance practice in the sunlit room. Getting more comfortable, Luchia happily exclaims that she's getting used to it and thanks Fenon. Fenon replies that he's simply glad he could be of help as he leads her in the dance. He gently advises the princess to relax her body more, which seems to confuse her. Fenon explains that focusing too hard on technique can disrupt the natural flow and that it's easier to let the stronger partner lead. As Luchia processes his advice, he adds that her core is much more stable now, making her less likely to lose balance. She's amazed he can discern her core strength, and he confirms that one can tell such things while dancing. Fenon notes her recent interest in physical activity, prompting a flustered Luchia to think it's just from dance practice. Panicking internally, she realizes she let her guard down and worries he can tell she's a different person from her movements. An illustration hilariously contrasts the sheltered princess with a village girl skilled at climbing trees and chopping wood. Luchia nervously ends their practice, saying she doesn't want to impose since he was just passing by. Fearing she'll slip up if they continue, she brightly reminds him they'll dance again at the summer solstice festival. A flicker of emotion crosses Fenon's face as he looks down at her. She thinks to herself that she has no one else she could ask for help. He promises to stay by her side as much as possible, and she privately accepts, thinking it will be good to have a familiar face among strangers. With a determined thought, she looks at a vision of her former maids and Vincent, knowing this will be her last event as Luchia. A memory surfaces of a girl in simple clothes running to greet two boys, a life far removed from her current one. Standing in the ballroom, Luchia smiles, her resolve shining in her eyes. She backpedals, saying he doesn't have to, but Fenon insists, telling her to leave it to him. Elsewhere, a hand reaches toward a room perfectly preserved in memory of someone named Fraulet. A handsome man with white hair notes that the room seems to be regularly maintained. His thoughts drift to the upcoming summer solstice festival, recalling a memory of a blonde woman holding a child. He remembers taking that woman's hand during a past festival. The white-haired man reflects that thinking of her lately no longer brings him bitterness. He believes the reason for this change lies somewhere among the portraits in her room. In a sun-drenched garden, the white-haired man sits at a table as Luchia approaches him with a hesitant look. As he looks up, he sees not Luchia, but a vision of the smiling blonde woman. Standing in the preserved room, he remembers the blonde woman once said something similar. A memory plays of him and the blonde woman together in a softly lit room. He recalls his confusion as the blonde woman spoke of continuing her efforts. In the memory, she touches his face and wonders if her love will bloom one day, causing him to cover his own face in the present. He thinks grimly that after all this time, she had not even once, never even said the words, he recalls, as a memory of her smiling with a bouquet of flowers appears. With a pained expression, he remembers she never once told him, "I love you," before the scene fades to be continued. An overview explains the summer solstice festival is a cherished tradition to pray for an abundant autumn and celebrate the new season. The scene transitions to a bustling town street, filled with families and vendors preparing for the festivities. A red-haired maid named Saria worriedly asks the white-haired princess if she's all right, but the princess cheerfully reassures her, saying she got permission this time. The princess internally celebrates her first festival in the capital, recalling how she pleaded with a woman to let her go out just once. She remembers the woman agreeing on the condition that she bring guards, but decides against it to avoid drawing attention. As she explains that Saria is her new personal maid, a dark-haired man approaches them from behind. The man suddenly grabs her shoulder, startling her as he addresses her as "Your Highness." Stunned, the princess looks up at him, stammering the first letter of a name. The dark-haired, red-eyed man stares down at her, revealing he heard she had left the palace without any guards. The princess quickly grabs Saria, protesting that her maid is with her. He sighs dismissively, stating that a maid doesn't count as a guard, leaving the princess deflated. After warning her of the dangers outside the palace, he surprisingly offers to accompany her for the rest of the day, much to her shock. The man addresses Saria directly, handing her his cloak and giving her an instruction which she promptly accepts. Saria realizes with alarm that she might be intruding on what has suddenly become a date between the two. The princess shoos Saria away, telling her to report back to Lady Emily, then calls after her in confusion as Saria dashes off. Now alone with the man, the princess stands awkwardly as he remains silent. She nervously asks Fen if he's busy, insisting she's fine on her own, but he doesn't seem to be listening. As they walk, Fenon suddenly shouts for her to watch out, grabbing her arm to stop her. He pulls her back just in time as two large horses thunder past them in the narrow street. Holding her protectively, Fenon tells her she could have tripped. The princess looks up at him. Fenon looks down at her with a questioning gaze while she blushes furiously. She frantically insists that nothing is wrong and apologizes as they stand in the bustling festival market. Walking through the crowd, she internally groans that she really didn't want to be alone with him. Her thoughts reveal the reason for her unease is because of what happened during their last dance. Worried, she reminds herself that he's incredibly sharp and she can't afford to let anything slip. He gently tugs on her cloak, stopping her in her tracks and making her look back in surprise. She asks what's wrong as he points toward a stall where a vendor is showing a child a beautiful blue sugar sculpture flower. She and Fenon are both captivated by the realization that the intricate sculptures are actually edible art. Nearby, other festival goers admire the beautiful treats, wondering if they're really meant to be eaten. The princess gazes at the candies, noticing a purple flower that reminds her of her mother's pendant. Fenon notices her interest and promptly tells the vendor that they'll buy the one she was looking at. She wonders if he saw her staring as he pays the vendor, who thanks him for the purchase. The vendor hands her a different treat, a golden bird, which she hesitantly accepts. The shopkeeper smiles, remarking how thoughtful her boyfriend is, causing her to cry out in shock. Fenon simply says they should go, not denying the comment, which flusters her even more as the vendor assumes she's just shy. As they walk away, she desperately tells herself to calm down. She reasons that since Fen is Luchia's fiancé, being called a couple isn't wrong. Though she herself is not Luchia, he interrupts her thoughts to ask if she dislikes the gift. She quickly shakes her head, waving her hands to assure him that's not it at all. Holding the golden bird, she flashes a bright, happy smile. She sincerely thanks him again before taking a small bite of the candy bird, her eyes widening in delighted surprise. She beams with joy over the treat, and Fenon watches her with a faint, warm smile. As they walk through the city, he notes that they've wandered far and suggests it's time to head back, and she agrees. She stops suddenly, asking Fenon about the place they've come across, and he asks if something is wrong. She observes children learning outside a building, noting that it feels like a class but somehow different. A woman kindly teaches two small children how to write multiplication problems in the dirt. Fenon confirms her suspicion, telling her that the building is a school. He explains it's a community school for lower district children, a result of the Emperor's policy guaranteeing free education, and asks if it's an orphanage. A brilliant idea strikes her. She could open a similar school in her village, using her own palace education to become the teacher. Her face lights up with excitement at the thought of all the village children receiving an education, which puzzles Fenon. Fenon calls out to the princess, snapping her out of her deep thought. She apologizes for getting lost in thought and says it's time for them to return. Dressed in a dark cloak, Fenon watches with a serious expression as the princess walks away from him down a sunlit road. Upon their return to the palace, they say their goodbyes for now before the ornate main gate. Later, as the sky turns crimson, maids attend to the white-haired princess, preparing her for a formal event. Nobles arrive at the Grand Palace for the Summer Solstice Festival, including a prominent blonde woman named Lady Adelia. The narration explains that the festival for nobles has officially begun as the silver-haired emperor gets ready. The princess stands revealed in a beautiful and intricate orange and white ball gown. While the public celebrates, nobles attend a palace party where the emperor's first dance partner this year will be the princess herself. Amidst the partygoers, a woman approaches the blonde noble, calling her Lady Adelia. Lady Adelia smiles warmly, confirming that she has been told she will be the emperor's partner. The other ladies praise her for the honor, and she modestly thanks them with a small laugh. She muses that the role should normally fall to Princess Luchia, but notes that Luchia has never attended the festival. A woman rushes over to Lady Adelia in a panic, announcing that she just saw Princess Luchia arriving, leaving Lady Adelia utterly shocked. In a quiet side room, the princess clutches her chest, feeling suddenly and overwhelmingly sick with anxiety. She panics internally, worried she'll forget the dance steps, as she has never even practiced with His Majesty before. A brown-haired maid offers her a drink to calm her nerves, which she gratefully accepts. Just as she begins to call out for Emi, she is cut short by the sight of someone approaching her. Her eyes widen in alarm as she looks up at the unexpected visitor. The Emperor takes her hand, calmly telling her to stop with the stiff greetings. The princess looks up at him, bewildered and flustered by his sudden appearance and directness. He teases her for being as tense as a wind-up toy, making her silently rage that he's the one making her so nervous. Gently touching her chin, he tells her to relax, mentioning he's heard that her dancing isn't bad. She realizes he must be referring to the real princess's reputation, though she herself worked hard at dancing. With a strained smile, she warns that she might step on his foot and apologizes in advance. In the background, a brown-haired man stifles a laugh at her bold remark. The Emperor calmly responds that he'll just let her fall, which horrifies her as she thinks he's supposed to catch her. She forces an awkward laugh while he watches her with a subtle, knowing smirk. He inwardly notes that she is still stiff, like a toy soldier, as the brown-haired man observes from behind. Frustrated, she finds the situation suffocating and wishes he would show a little compassion to his own daughter. Needing a moment, she steps out onto a balcony, overlooking the vibrant party below. She stands alone under the starry sky, resolving that her life as Luchia must end after this festival. With a heavy heart, she admits to herself that she won't pretend she isn't a little sad about leaving. She reminisces about how much has happened in such a short time, recalling memories of her mother and friends. An image of the loyal elderly man kneeling before her flashes in her mind. She cherishes the brief but precious memories she's made, from being pampered by maids to time spent with her mother. Thinking of Fenon, she feels grateful for all the new experiences she's had. Her resolve strengthens as she looks forward to her new goal, returning to her village to start a school. As she stands lost in thought, a red-haired maid quietly watches her from a nearby doorway. The maid approaches, informing the princess that her hair is out of place and needs tidying before her dance. Surprised, the princess touches her hair, annoyed at her own carelessness. The maid suggests fixing her hair there to avoid the dressing room where His Majesty might be. Agreeing it would be improper to fix her hair in front of the Emperor, she accepts the maid's offer. The red-haired maid smiles and courteously leads her down the hall. Growing wary as the corridor becomes deserted, the princess questions their path, but the maid assures her it's a private spot. The maid leads her to a dark, cluttered room filled with large trunks. Without warning, the maid shoves the princess forcefully into the dark room. Crying out in shock, the princess stumbles forward as the door slams shut behind her. Thud! She hits the floor with a hard jolt. Outside the now locked door, a brown-haired man finds the nervous maid. The Emperor appears, looking for the princess and asking the man what's wrong. The Emperor reports with a grim expression that Princess Luchia is nowhere to be seen, stunning the other man. In the bustling ballroom, partygoers grow anxious as they wonder what to do now that the event is about to begin. The brown-haired man suggests to the Emperor that the princess's weak constitution might be to blame, but the Emperor flatly rejects the idea. The Emperor's thoughts drift to a memory of a young Luchia watching him from afar. A memory of Luchia standing before him, her long white hair tied with a blue ribbon, flashes through his mind. He recalls another moment, seeing Luchia and the brown-haired man standing formally in his office. The Emperor remembers her determined orange eyes, a look that contradicts the idea of her being weak. He firmly concludes that her supposed weakness isn't the reason for her disappearance. The brown-haired man is taken aback by the Emperor's certainty. The Emperor has a haunting premonition of Luchia falling into a dark, foreboding void. Thump! Locked in the dark, the princess desperately bangs on the door, panicking that the festival will begin without her. She realizes her absence will halt the party, causing a scandal that would tarnish the crown princess's reputation. Remembering the real Luchia's kindness, she resolves that she cannot let the princess's name be disgraced. Spotting a high window as her only escape, she prepares to climb onto a nearby trunk. She scrambles out the window onto a dizzyingly high ledge, immediately realizing the danger she's in. Elsewhere, the emperor impatiently asks his aide if there's any news of the princess, but the brown-haired man reports no success. The man confirms they have searched the entire palace for the crown princess, with one notable exception, Windsor Palace. He adds that her personal palace reported she never returned there, leaving the emperor to ponder the mystery. An attendant interrupts, informing the emperor that the guests have arrived and suggests proceeding with the opening ceremony as planned. Ignoring the suggestion, the emperor storms off, ordering his stunned aide to delay the opening. The aide calls out in shock as the emperor walks away with grim determination. In the dark room, her discarded shoes lie on the floor, a silent testament to her desperate escape. Dangling from a rope of torn fabric, she struggles to lower herself down the castle wall, pushing through the strain. She accepts she will be late, but is driven by the need to prove to the emperor that Luchia did not flee her duty. Panicked, she realizes her current state makes it impossible to switch with the real Luchia, as she would only burden her with disgrace. Even the emperor would blame Luchia if he saw her now, tainting the princess's reputation forever. She berates herself for her recklessness, realizing she has no idea who orchestrated this trap. She laments her ignorance of palace politics, unable to identify a suspect among the nobles who might want to harm Luchia. Driven by memories of past abuse and neglect, she knows she must keep going or risk returning to that life. Thump. Her fingers lose their grip on the stone ledge as she whispers that she's at her limit. Looking down, she sees the emperor, who shouts her name, leaving her stunned by his sudden appearance. With his arm outstretched, the emperor urgently tells her to jump, promising he will catch her. Trusting him, she lets go of her makeshift rope and begins to fall. She lands safely in his arms, held securely against his chest. He holds her close as she exhales in relief, her heart still pounding from the ordeal. As the brown-haired man rushes toward them, she realizes she has to explain what happened. While the aide expresses his relief, her first thought is that she succeeded. She proved Luchia didn't run away. The emperor, however, immediately concludes the truth of the matter. Someone intentionally locked her up. Holding her protectively, he intensely demands to know who was responsible. Flustered, she recalls the brown-haired maid, but the emperor presses her for any other details she might remember. She apologizes for not seeing the maid's face clearly, and he sighs in frustration knowing the trail is already cold. Cradling her, the emperor commands his guards to secretly lock down the palace and find the culprit. He gently asks her to tell him if she remembers anything else, leaving her to wonder about his concern. She silently questions why he trusts her account without any hesitation. As she struggles to find her words, he prompts her to speak her mind. Finally, she asks him outright why he isn't suspicious of her actions. She immediately regrets asking, realizing it would have been easier for him to believe she had simply run away. He looks down at her disheveled state and asks, with a deadpan expression, if she has a fondness for dusty places. As she vehemently denies it, he smirks and teasingly asks if she has a hobby of falling from high places. As he playfully messes with her hair, the emperor teases her about having a death wish, which she vehemently denies. He smiles, concluding that there's no way she would have gone to such a dirty place on her own. Stunned by his complete trust, she looks up at him with wide, emotional eyes. A memory flashes of him desperately reaching for her as she fell from the castle wall. Back in the present and held safely in his arms, she softly addresses him as Your Majesty. Overwhelmed with emotion, she tells him how truly grateful she is. She thanks him for believing in her and coming to her rescue, but he simply reminds her of her own words. As he carries her through the moonlit gardens, he recalls her lesson about flowers needing water, leaving her confused. In a flashback, she explains to him by a fountain that flowers only bloom beautifully because they are cared for. Touched that he remembered her words, she blushes and smiles softly in his arms. As they enter a palace hall, a shocked brown-haired maid calls out to the crown princess. The emperor orders the maid to have the princess's clothes changed and to prepare her immediately. While the maid agrees, she looks on in confusion, wondering what he means by prepare. She panics internally, thinking he can't possibly expect her to dance now, but he just smirks and asks if she's opposed. He clarifies his intentions, asking if she doesn't want to get revenge on those who wronged her, causing her to gasp in realization. Turning her head with newfound resolve, she agrees that he's right. Filled with determination, she smiles at the maid and declares she'll get changed right away. Elsewhere at the party, a blonde woman in a purple dress notes that the opening ceremony already began. The blonde woman wonders why her aunt is still present and recalls telling her maid to be loyal to the Grand Duke Claymore. Believing her plan is proceeding smoothly, the blonde woman is stunned by the announcement of the emperor and crown princess's arrival. Now in a stunning light blue gown, she descends the grand staircase with the emperor, silencing the crowd. The emperor gently takes her hand, ready to present her to the court as she looks radiant by his side. She stands transformed under a celestial sky, looking every bit the princess. A trio of female musicians plays elegant music on their violins for the banquet. Though delayed, the solstice banquet finally begins, with the emperor and princess taking the floor for the first dance. He leads her onto the dance floor, and they begin to waltz under the golden lights of the ballroom. Their hands are joined gracefully as they move in perfect sync to the music. The emperor notes with surprise that she dances so naturally, as if it's not her first time. They continue to glide across the floor, lost in the moment. A faint smile plays on his lips as he watches her during their dance. As she looks up at him, a thought about the dress she's wearing suddenly strikes her. She remembers the maid telling her that this beautiful gown once belonged to the crown princess's mother. A flashback shows her stunned reaction upon hearing about the dress's origin. While dancing, she reflects on how the man before her, who was supposed to ignore Luchia, is now her partner. She gazes at him with a complex mix of emotions as they continue their dance. Thump. She stumbles mid-step, but he catches her instantly, telling her not to fall. He holds her securely, his hand on her back as he looks down at her. He effortlessly lifts her off her feet, remarking with a sigh that she's such a handful. He gives her a knowing, handsome smile as he holds her. Flustered by his sudden display of strength, she looks up at him with a blush. As he sets her down, she realizes he must have his own reasons for this unexpected behavior. A noble couple approaches, formally greeting her as Your Highness. A young man with dark hair and a formal red uniform, Fenon, makes his entrance. She feels a wave of anxiety, overwhelmed by the crowd of strangers surrounding her. Spotting Fenon, she smiles in relief, telling him she's glad to see him and was looking for him. Fenon looks surprised, as she admits she's still not used to large events like this. She smiles and asks if she said something strange, while Fenon looks down, seemingly contemplating his response. Fenon smiles warmly and confesses that he also wanted to see her. He leans in to whisper, asking if she's all right after hearing about her incident, and she's impressed by his sources. She assures him she's fine, but reflects that the maid who trapped her still hasn't been found, and her memory of the culprit is fading. She internally expresses her frustration, as she's usually good at remembering faces but can't recall the culprits. She worries that if the truth of her imprisonment gets out, it will create a major scandal for the princess. Believing the emperor understands the political delicacy, she scans the crowd, sensing dark intentions from the other nobles. With a confident smile, she declares internally that she already has a good idea who the culprit is. She reflects that while harming royalty is a grave crime, involving the emperor could escalate things, and she doesn't want to cause a scene. Despite her reservations, a determined glint appears in her eyes as she admits that letting it go would infuriate her. Turning to Fenon with a plan in mind, she tells him she has a favor to ask, and he readily inquires. Leaning in, she makes her request. From now on, he must act as if they are very close. Fenon looks back at her, visibly surprised by her bold and unexpected proposition. With Fenon now at her side, she confidently calls out to the startled blonde woman, addressing her as Lady Adelia. Lady Adelia quickly composes herself, flashing a brilliant smile as she warmly greets Your Highness. After exchanging pleasantries, Lady Adelia smirks to herself, certain the princess couldn't have noticed her involvement since she used an unaffiliated maid. The princess compliments Lady Adelia's beauty, then pointedly asks Fenon for his opinion, and he stiffly agrees. Lady Adelia seems genuinely flattered by the praise, her cheeks flushing as she murmurs, "Oh my." Leaning into Fenon's arm, the princess compliments Lady Adelia's charm, but Adelia dismisses it as flattery. Taking his role seriously, Fenon puts his arm around the princess, pulling her close and causing her to look up in surprise. He leans in close, whispering that he even felt a bit jealous watching her dance with His Majesty earlier. Thump. He gently brings her hand to his lips, kissing it with a look of intense devotion. She stares in wide-eyed shock, completely caught off guard by his convincing and forward display of affection. Whoa. While internally panicking that he's overdoing it, she plays along, feigning bashful delight at his romantic gesture. As the crowd whispers about how close they seem, Lady Adelia watches them with an expression of pure fury. Gulp. Leaning in, the princess whispers a veiled warning to Lady Adelia about people who love to cause drama. She finishes her pointed remark with a disarmingly sweet and innocent smile. Her point made, she turns her back on Lady Adelia and cheerfully tells Fenon it's time to leave. Once they're away, Fenon asks if his performance was sufficient, and she internally praises his perfect acting. Still flustered, Fenon asks why she targeted Lady Adelia, identifying her as a member of the Claymore family. She realizes Fenon is unaware of Lady Adelia's schemes, confirming they aren't close, and that Adelia's assumptions were completely wrong. Chuckling, she dismisses it as a little payback, leaving a confused Fenon to question her meaning. With a playful smile, she deflects his question, simply stating that it's a girl's secret. He smiles warmly in response, accepting her mysterious answer without further questions. The two share a moment of mutual understanding and camaraderie after their successful act. A soft, satisfied smile graces her face, pleased with the outcome of her little scheme. As the Solstice Festival concludes, the narration reveals that her time acting as the royal princess has come to an end. Walking alone through a vast, moonlit hall, she reflects that her life as a princess is finally over. Elsewhere, the light purple-haired emperor departs from a room, leaving something behind. He speaks to the memory of a blonde woman named Frau, remarking how their daughter is becoming more like her every day. His hand gently places a small, dark box onto a polished surface. In a memory, Frau looks at him lovingly from her bed, telling him she has something important to entrust to him. Her hands are shown giving him a simple chain necklace from a box, a gift for a future occasion. The memory of Frau's determined words hangs in the air as the emperor recalls her final request. Having left the box on the table, the emperor turns and walks away, his duty fulfilled. The box contains a delicate silver necklace, adorned with a white dove pendant, a symbol of peace and love. With the festival over, she stands cloaked before the throne, ready for her and the real princess to return to their original lives. But the turning page of a book reveals a twist. Things did not go as planned. Now back in her original body and humble room, she looks up in confusion, asking, "We're not switching back yet." A flashback reveals her panic after the agreement, with the real Luchia angrily reminding her their deal was supposed to end with the festival. The real Luchia, now in her body, proudly displays a beautiful piece of embroidery, excited that she's been commissioned for more work. As Lucia muses about her newfound talent for sewing, a furious aura explodes from the woman in Lucia's body. She understands Lucia's happiness, but knows the situation is dangerous, with crimes like deception and disguising royalty carrying a death sentence. Suddenly, a voice shouts Lucia's name, marking a dramatic turning point in her unexpected life. Defeated, the princess realizes she was talked into the switch again, berating herself for being so foolish as her maid looks on. Peeking out the window, she looks conflicted, contemplating her next move. She recalls hearing the lady of the house was pregnant and wanting to help her through her severe morning sickness, though the trip was meant to last a year. Remembering a green-haired woman's offer to help with sewing, she thought she could endure the switch, but her duties became overwhelmingly complicated. Agreeing with someone named Lou, she steals her resolve with a sly smile, deciding to commit to her plan. In a flashback, she asks a white-haired woman in a brown cloak if she has control over the imperial budget. The woman in the cloak gives her permission to manage the funds as she pleases and open a school in her hometown. The cloaked woman is horrified, remembering excitedly telling a young Luchia about her plan. The girl in the orange dress winks, suggesting the funds are payment for them switching places. The cloaked woman agonizes over her choice as an angelic version of herself weighs down the scales of risk with tempting gold coins. Back in the present, she admits to herself that money is too tempting and that she has lost the battle of wills. Deciding her secret is safe for now, she turns to her maid and hands her something. The light brown-haired maid announces that the princess's tea is ready, and she calmly accepts. Standing tall and resolute, the white-haired princess vows to perform her duties honorably until the very end. At a garden party, a blonde lady praises the princess's beauty and her stunning dance performance. The blonde lady, Emily, explains she was avoiding someone named Lady Adelia, which the princess understands. Emily excitedly shares a rumor that the princess and Lord Fenon have become quite close, flustering the princess. The princess hesitates, struggling to find the right words to respond. Blushing, she insists that she and the man were only pretending to be close. Emily presses for details, revealing that a maid named Saria gave her a full report, which mortifies the princess. The red-haired maid, Saria, tries to flee by offering to get more tea, but the princess calls out for Lisette, another maid. Lisette smiles, explaining she didn't want to be impolite by ordering around a count's daughter like Emily. The princess is aghast that Lisette is also in on the teasing as Emily leans in, eager for gossip. As they playfully pester her, a woman in a pink dress interrupts, calling for Lady Luchia. Relieved by the interruption, the princess greets the woman as Sheena, who has arrived with serious news. Sheena announces that a messenger from the palace has come to summon Lady Luchia for His Majesty. The princess and her companions are stunned into silence by the unexpected royal summons. Regaining her composure, the princess addresses her maid, Lisette, as they prepare to leave. Walking toward a grand set of doors, she asks Lisette if the emperor has ever summoned her this way before. Lisette announces the princess's arrival, and the princess braces herself before entering the room. A brown-haired man opens the door, and the purple-haired man inside warmly welcomes her. The princess kneels respectfully, offering her greetings to His Majesty the Emperor. When she asks why she was summoned, the emperor calls for a man named Alf to present a document. She looks between the two men, confused, and asks what the document is. The emperor presents a list of potential instructors and instructs her to choose one. The princess is bewildered, questioning why she would need instructors. Alf explains that the emperor found her current lesson plans lacking and wishes to increase her lectures. Completely confused, the princess tries to process what she's just been told. The horrifying realization dawns on her that this means even more lessons in dancing, history, literature, and tea parties. The emperor smirks, informing her that her new lectures are scheduled to begin next week, much to her dismay. He tells her it's time to make up for her slacking, and she silently thinks how mean he is. He leans in close, feigning concern by asking if her stomach hurts, as she stares at him in terror. She shouts, "No," as the emperor smiles, clearly enjoying her reaction. Forcing a strained smile, she claims to be honored but admits that it's all too much. The emperor watches her with a satisfied grin as she struggles to maintain her composure. The princess and the emperor stand in silence as the attendants depart from the room. Looking pensive, the emperor turns to the princess and asks her a question. Her eyes widen in understanding as he informs her that the Empress has returned. He reveals that the Empress has just arrived back at the palace, as a blonde woman in blue is shown standing before it. A summary introduces the current Empress, Ivana, who gained power after the previous Empress, Malfleur, was expelled from the council. The narration explains a purple-haired woman's 2-month absence was due to her father, the Grand Duke, becoming ill. Now a blonde woman in a regal blue gown arrives by carriage, having returned from caring for her father and managing their territory. Watching her pass, two maids whisper that she is known for being kind-hearted and intelligent. Other servants are equally stunned by her presence, as she is regarded as the most beautiful woman in the empire. A white-haired man reflects on how Empress Ivana is described, a woman who stands proudly by the emperor's side. The blonde woman approaches a grand set of doors, which two guards open to reveal a brightly lit hall. Inside, a young white-haired girl formally greets the Emperor of Altrasia, who stands beside her. The blonde woman, the ruler of the Ensemble Empire, declares that her subjects eagerly await her return. The young white-haired girl is completely awestruck, thinking to herself how beautiful the woman is. She compares the blonde woman to Adelia, concluding this woman's beauty represents the allure of a grown woman. She assumes the emperor must be happy with such a stunning wife, but a glance at his intense expression makes her reconsider. A close-up reveals the emperor's cold, calculating purple eye. The emperor finally speaks, asking the blonde woman about the health of Grand Duke Montrose. The blonde woman replies with a serene smile, reporting that her father is thankfully beginning to recover. She apologizes for her father missing the council, but the emperor dismisses it, stating a replacement was already found. She then thanks him for the gifts he sent, but he brushes it off, changing the subject to state affairs while she was gone. The white-haired girl is shocked by their cold, formal exchange, wondering if this is normal for a royal couple after 2 months apart. Peeking from behind a desk, she imagines how their reunion should be unfolding. In her imagination, she pictures them holding hands lovingly. Her fantasy culminates in a passionate hug, but she's brought back to the cold reality, questioning their lack of affection. She looks between the stoic pair and wonders if their formality is simply because she is present. The blonde woman finally turns her attention to the girl, startling her by acknowledging the princess's presence. Realizing she's been staring, the girl quickly moves to apologize for not greeting the Empress sooner. She performs a perfect curtsy, expressing her relief at the Empress's safe return and apologizing for the delayed welcome. The Empress seems amused by the girl's formality, covering her mouth as she murmurs, "Oh dear." Hey, the Empress tells Luchia not to apologize, which makes her happy, before the Emperor curtly asks the Empress what she needed. The Emperor clarifies that he was the one who summoned the Empress to the palace. With a pleased smile, the Empress simply responds, "I see." The Empress then asks the Emperor if the matter he called her for has been resolved and what it was about. He dismisses her question as nothing for a duke's daughter to worry about, prompting her to correct her former title with a laugh. She confidently reminds him that she is his wife now, not just a duke's daughter. Observing the tense exchange, Luchia thinks to herself that the mood has suddenly become very awkward. The Emperor calls out to Luchia, asking why she's standing so far away, prompting her to seize the opportunity to speak. Seizing her chance, Luchia quickly thanks the Emperor and declares that at times like this, the best move is to run away. She wishes the Empress a good rest after her journey, already planning her escape. With a cheerful, "I'll take my leave," Luchia dashes out of the room, slamming the doors behind her. Safely outside, she apologizes to her waiting attendants for the delay, visibly relieved to be away from the tension. Back in the study, the Empress announces that she will also be leaving, thanking the Emperor for his time. As she leaves, the Emperor recalls that the Empress has custody of the princess, then calls out the name Alf with a grim expression. The Emperor orders his brown-haired aide, Alf, to keep an eye on the Empress for a while. Alf clears his throat and cautiously advises the Emperor that his continued coldness might cause someone to resent him. Popping up from behind the speech bubble, Alf clarifies that he is, of course, referring to the princess. Alf notes that most girls her age avoid their fathers, but the Emperor coolly states that if she has the courage to hate him to his face. A sly grin spreads across the Emperor's face as he admits he'd actually look forward to that, much to Alf's dismay. Alf gently suggests that, since the Emperor has never shown interest in Luchia's studies, a few words of encouragement might make her happy. The Emperor calls the idea ridiculous, but Alf counters, observing that His Majesty seems genuinely happy when speaking to the princess. Annoyed, the Emperor threatens Alf with more work, causing the aide to quickly back down with an apology. Later, while walking in the garden with a maid, Luchia admits the Empress's sudden appearance caught her completely off guard. Blushing, she thinks back on the encounter, admitting to herself that the Empress truly is beautiful. She recalls the Empress's warm and gentle gaze, but is troubled by the memory of the Emperor's pained expression, as a maid calls her name, Luchia. Surprised, the white-haired girl gasps and calls out, "Your Majesty the Empress." Luchia catches up to the Empress, confused why she's walking away from her own residence. The Empress turns with a warm smile, asking if Luchia chased after her. The Empress explains she was worried and wanted to check on Luchia, who nervously insists everything was fine. Inquiring about Luchia's meeting with the Emperor, the Empress is surprised to learn he was introducing a new teacher, not scolding her. The Empress remarks that everything seems to be going well for Luchia, leaving the girl slightly puzzled. Noting that a lot seems to have happened, the Empress invites Luchia to have tea together sometime. Extending her hand, the Empress says she would like to hear all about it. The Empress offers her hand with a gentle, knowing smile. Luchia looks on, stunned and wide-eyed at the sudden invitation. The next day, the Empress's invitation for tea is recounted. She had even offered Luchia the chance to decline. Luchia is thrilled as her maids prepare her, impressed by the Empress's meticulous planning that accommodated her class schedule. A narrator reflects on the tense political situation, where Luchia is seen as suspicious and a threat to the Empress's potential heir. As Luchia heads out, she thinks that despite the political tensions, she didn't sense any ill will from the Empress. Pausing before the grand doors, Luchia nervously wonders if she's just overthinking the situation. As Luchia walks through a sunlit garden, a maid's voice narrates the history of the Empress, explaining the initial controversy surrounding her marriage to the Emperor. The narration reveals the Empress's older sister was once the fiancé of the late Crown Prince, the Emperor's older brother. After the Crown Prince's death, the Empress's sister remained bedridden and passed away around the same time as Luchia's mother. Because of this history, the Emperor's remarriage to the Empress was widely rumored to be an act of sympathy for her family. Luchia considers this new information, thinking that she previously wouldn't have considered the Emperor to be a sentimental person. She speculates that marriage is a powerful political tool and that perhaps the Emperor's resistance stemmed from truly loving the former Empress. An image materializes of the Emperor from behind, walking alongside a blonde woman in a simple blue dress. Luchia dismisses the idea, thinking the Emperor seems far too cold to fall in love. Her thoughts are interrupted by the Emperor himself, who smirks and asks if she was really planning on walking right past him. Startled, Luchia's head comically splits into 3 panicked versions as she denies it, while his aide Alf smirks. The Emperor teasingly commends her nerve, which Luchia recognizes as intimidation, and she quickly apologizes. He asks where she is going, and when she nervously replies she has tea with the Empress, his expression instantly darkens. Seeing his sudden change in mood, Luchia cautiously asks if His Majesty is all right. The Emperor stares down at her with a cold, intense look. He pauses thoughtfully, his finger to his chin, as Alf watches with a curious expression. The Emperor points out she must have forgotten how large the palace is. As a map reveals, she's heading toward the wrong gate for a carriage, causing Luchia to blush in embarrassment. Realizing her mistake, Luchia tells her maid she must go now and dashes off in a hurry. The Emperor and Alf watch silently as she runs away. With her long hair flowing behind her, Luchia hurries down the palace colonnade. The Emperor watches her leave with a grim, unreadable expression. At a beautifully set tea table, the Empress begins by saying she wants to apologize. She apologizes for her former maid, Imelda, admitting she was unaware of the mistreatment Luchia endured because of her. With a remorseful expression, the Empress formally apologizes directly to Luchia. Flustered by the Empress's gesture, Luchia waves her hands and begs her to raise her head. The Empress explains that she billed the maid for the stolen money and won't be silent anymore, as a cute doodle shows a tiny Luchia catching the thieves. Luchia is touched by the gesture, thinking to herself how truly kind the Empress is. With a gentle smile, Luchia reflects that after finally meeting and speaking with the Empress directly, she's convinced that the Empress genuinely seems to care for her well-being. They enjoy a delightful tea time together, with Luchia happily proclaiming how delicious the desserts are. The Empress observes that Luchia seems to have changed since their last meeting, piquing the girl's curiosity. Luchia beams, asking if she's really changed, and the Empress confirms it, beginning to explain her past behavior. The Empress recalls that Luchia never used to accept her tea invitations right away, a memory that strikes Luchia with a pang of truth. Luchia admits with a bashful smile that she wasn't confident in her etiquette back then. She explains that she always felt inferior, as the Empress's manners and gestures were always so perfect. Luchia apologizes if her past behavior seemed disrespectful, while the Empress listens in thoughtful silence. With a sweet smile, the Empress tells Luchia that what's most important is that she has confidence now. From the Empress's perspective, she reaches out a hand toward a wide-eyed and surprised Luchia. The Empress then mentions hearing that Luchia danced with the Emperor at the festival, asking if her mindset has changed since she used to avoid public appearances. Luchia explains that the Emperor was the one who took the initiative, while outside the window, a large blackbird watches them, and the Empress thinks to herself how unexpected that is. As the bird's eye glows ominously, the Empress wonders if the Emperor, who has been unusually soft with Luchia, has had a change of heart, making Luchia feel like she's being probed. The Empress kindly offers to be a confidant for Luchia, whose words sound sincere, yet Luchia can't shake the feeling that something is off. Her face ominously shadowed, the Empress declares that even without a blood relation, she is still Luchia's mother, deepening Luchia's sense of unease. After their tea, the Empress waves goodbye from a window as Luchia departs in a golden carriage. Once Luchia is gone, the Empress turns back into the room and, with a quick tap-tap, rings a small handbell. A dark-haired maid in a purple uniform quickly appears and bows, asking if Her Majesty called for her. The Empress's kind demeanor vanishes as she coldly asks the maid why the crown princess would dance with the Emperor, causing the maid to stumble backward in fear. Looming over the terrified maid, the Empress states that it should be obvious they can't let Luchia appear in public. The Empress forcefully grabs the maid's chin, asserting that she knows exactly what she means without it being said aloud. The maid recalls trying to convince the princess, only for Luchia to escape through a window with the Emperor's help, prompting the Empress to wonder when she became so brave. Remembering Luchia's fearless gaze, the Empress declares that such defiance cannot be allowed and orders the trembling maid to investigate the princess. Her thoughts flash through images of everyone around Luchia, her father, her friends, and the maids, as she resolves to know about all recent events and even the smallest changes. With a sinister and determined expression, the Empress gives her final command: look into every single detail.